On the first day of my marriage, my husband destroyed my kingdom and killed my family. The red makeup was ruined, the wedding dress was torn. I destroyed her country, I deceived her feelings. I married her to the people, I lived in humiliation. He said, "You have to live forever." Later, she pointed the tip of the sword at his throat. But he smiled, and stretched his neck forward as if relieved. This world, this life, was originally meant to be returned to you. Only then did she know that what he said about her living forever was a promise. Chapter 1, The Wedding Continues. The sky over the entire Yang kingdom was shrouded in a misty black, with heavy snow blanketing the earth below. The imperial guards' long spears glinted with a terrifying aura, pointing straight at the figure kneeling in the snow. Layer upon layer, they surrounded her, forming a wall so tight that no one could escape. Her wedding dress had long since been stained with mud, blood, and darkened from the relentless abuse. "Run, princess, run!" Suddenly yanked from the ground, Chin Ruoruo numbly took a few steps, but then her arm grew heavy. In her hand was only a severed limb still warm to the touch. Its owner had been torn apart by hungry wolves, the body ripped to pieces, leaving only the head, its eyes staring at her with a silent gaze, the lips trembling as though trying to speak. Survive? How could this happen? Chin Ruoruo's whole body trembled uncontrollably, her throat making a dry rasping sound from the fear. After a few desperate breaths, her voice finally broke out. "I want to see Yang Jinyuan. Yang Jinyuan! Come out!" Her heartbreaking scream echoed and circled through the sky. Torches were lit one after another, and in the blink of an eye, the night sky was as bright as day. It also revealed the figure of the man sitting on the high platform, silently watching this tragic scene. "Ruoruo, long time no see." Yang Jinyuan's voice was as calm as ever, though it no longer held the image of the youthful, blue-robed boy from her memories. Instead, he wore black and gold armor, sitting there in an air of nobility and aloofness. Suddenly, a sharp pain struck her knee. Chin Ruoruo, kicked harshly, collapsed onto a pile of corpses. "Help! Princess! Save us!" Not far away, the desperate cries of men and women filled the air, mixed with the howls of beasts. Chin Ruoruo's blood seemed to freeze. The voices of those crying were her attendants, those who had accompanied her to this place. And now, the dead were dead, and the violated had been violated. She knelt at the feet of the man who was supposed to marry her, and her fate was just as precarious. She gazed up at the familiar figure on the high platform, then pulled at the phoenix crown atop her head, which was about to fall off. The wind and snow stung her eyes, which were so dry they felt as if they might bleed. No matter how she rubbed them, she could not make out the expression of the man above. She stubbornly and unwillingly asked again and again, her voice hoarse and like the cries of a blood-soaked raven, "Yang Jinyuan, why? Ruoruo, if you must blame someone, blame it on the fact that you are the princess of the Qin kingdom." His voice was cold and distant, with no warmth. Chin Ruoruo felt a momentary daze. This was the voice that once held all the tenderness and affection in the world, but when did it become so unfamiliar? She had begged her father for a long time before he finally agreed to let her travel thousands of miles to marry in this barbarian land. Instead of the wedding she had dreamed of, she had arrived at a meticulously prepared hell. She shakily got up again, her thin wedding dress fluttering in the howling blizzard, fragile and vulnerable, but she still straightened her back, her face full of disbelief. "Yang Jinyuan, 10 years of affection, have you forgotten it all? Didn't you swear to love and protect me? How can you commit such treacherous and vile acts, not fearing that my Qin's iron cavalry will trample your land?" Those oaths were merely part of today's grand plan to fool you. Yang Jinyuan closed his eyes, his expression devoid of any warmth. "You probably don't know yet, but the moment your bridal carriage left the city, our troops attacked, and your father and mother were executed, all to relieve your longing for this faraway marriage. Their heads have already been sent here and buried in the snow beneath your feet. Ruoruo, your family has finally reunited." "It's impossible. This can't be happening." Chin Ruoruo stumbled back, shaking her head and looking down. She fell helplessly to the snow, desperately digging into the frozen mud and snow beneath her, her hands so cold her nails cracked and fell off. She dug until her hands were covered in blood, but when she finally saw a strand of hair, her movements slowed down, then became frantic again as she continued to dig. She finally unearthed the severed heads, and she collapsed in exhaustion. She had clearly seen her father and mother waving goodbye to her from the city walls as she left, holding her wedding wine. How could this be happening? With a sudden jolt, Qin Ruoruo looked up in disbelief. It was their wedding wine. As if reading her thoughts, Yang Jinyuan slowly descended from the platform. The wine we drank at the wedding was laced with a softening agent. With the help of my 30,000 troops, your 200,000 cavalry were easily disarmed and captured. He raised his hand and tossed a sheepskin scroll, which landed right at her feet. I have endured 10 years of humiliation for you and for this battle plan. If it weren't for you leading me to your military camp to play around, I probably wouldn't have gotten this plan so easily. Ruoruo, you've helped me again. Qin Ruoruo slowly turned her gaze from Yang Jinyuan's face to the sheepskin scroll on the ground, then collapsed into despair, screaming. "R!" She grabbed the head tightly in her arms, and a single tear fell, soon followed by a flood of tears mixing with the blood on the ground. Her desperate cries blended with the howling wind and snow, sounding like the anguish of a heart being torn apart. The laughter of the Yang soldiers celebrating their victory mingled with it, full of mockery. Suddenly, Qin Ruoruo stopped crying and slowly sat up. She released the heads, bowed 3 times, then let out a hollow laugh. "I was wrong. I should have been cold-hearted when you begged us to shelter you and your defeated army, should have stood by and let them kill you, this beast with a wolf's heart." Yang Jinyuan sighed lightly. "If you speak like this in front of them, Ruoruo, you're courting death." But Qin Ruoruo didn't care. She kept laughing, her tears falling down her cheeks, her laugh hoarse and like a demon crawling out of hell. "Yes, let your soldiers kill me. I will pray with blood in the underworld, cursing you with my bones. Even if I have to be reincarnated as a beast for 20 lifetimes, I'll curse you. Wait for your heavenly punishment and see how you die without a grave. Come, kill me." Har har har. The Imperial Guards drew their cold blades, raising them high above her head. But Qin Ruoruo continued to laugh wildly, her eyes cold and unafraid, her neck held high. She let the blade rise, then fall heavily. A crisp clash sounded as the blade veered off course, falling into the snow. Qin Ruoruo stopped laughing, her heart wrenching. She looked up to see Yang Jinyuan standing before her. Her chin was grabbed, forcing her to look up at him. "Who said you would die? You won't die. The wedding will continue. You will marry, but not to me. You will marry all the men of my Yang kingdom, regardless of age or rank, and all of them can enter your chambers." Yang Jinyuan's eyes narrowed, and as he stood up, a cold smile tugged at the corner of his mouth as he proclaimed, "Since we've been childhood friends for 10 years, tonight I'll be your first guest." Chapter 2, Dragged Out. "Your Highness is mighty. Your Highness is mighty." The surrounding Imperial Guards cheered in unison, their gazes becoming increasingly lewd and wanton. "Beast." Qin Ruoruo trembled with hatred, her teeth grinding together, and she stared at Yang Jinyuan with fury. Finally, unable to contain her anger any longer, she picked up a knife from the ground and rushed toward him. "I'll kill you." But before she could get close, a nearby guard easily subdued her, slamming her back onto the snow, even dislocating her wrist, leaving her to gasp for air helplessly. "Bold." The Imperial Guard slapped her twice, causing her teeth to loosen, and a streak of fresh blood trickled from the corner of her mouth. "Don't be foolish, Ruoruo. Why suffer like this? Don't think about committing suicide. I won't let you die. If you don't behave, I'll take you right here." Yang Jinyuan crouched down and casually took out a handkerchief, wiping the blood from her face, just like when they first met years ago, when she had fallen before him, and he had wiped the dust off her face. Looking at the familiar pattern on the handkerchief, Qin Ruoruo's fists clenched tightly. This pattern was one she had embroidered for him when he turned 10. As the only legitimate princess of the Qin kingdom, she had never learned needlework, but she had pricked her fingers countless times to complete it. At the time, as a young girl, she hadn't felt the pain, but now, it felt all the more ironic. With a sudden movement, she lunged at the handkerchief, intending to snatch it away, even if she had to bite it to destroy it. But Yang Jinyuan was quicker to react, pressing her acupuncture points to stop her. "Spit." Unable to move, Qin Ruoruo seized the opportunity to spit forcefully, hitting his handsome, cold face. Seeing Yang Jinyuan's expression stiffen, Qin Ruoruo let out a sharp, tragic laugh in the wind. A single tear quickly fell from her eye. Yang Jinyuan swallowed hard, raised his hand to stop the Imperial Guards from carrying out further punishment, and after a few breaths, his expression returned to normal. Indifferently wiping the blood from his face, he ordered, "Take her into the tent. Clean her up and prepare her for the reward." Several burly women rushed over, dragging Chin Ruoruo into the tent. Before she could understand what was about to happen, her clothes were all ripped off. Without a shred of courtesy, she was thrown into a cold bath, the icy water climbing up her spine to chill her entire body. Several large hands grabbed her hair and forced her head down into the water. Just as she was about to suffocate, they pulled her up again, roughly scrubbing her body with a coarse brush. This repetitive and brutal act was a complete humiliation, as if she were nothing more than a rag. Who would have thought that we, who clean the latrines, would have the chance to bathe the legitimate princess of Qin? Legitimate princess? She's just a lowly concubine from a fallen kingdom. Didn't the third prince give orders that from tonight, she will be the lowest of the low? Even we are above her. Look at this waterlogged skin, I'd love to turn into a man just to enjoy her. The lewd laughter echoed in her ears, like a fire burning the despair in Chin Ruoruo's heart to ashes. Thinking about the fate that awaited her, to be trampled by thousands of men, Chin Ruoruo, seizing the chance as the women laughed, held her breath and let herself sink into the water, allowing the suffocating sensation to overwhelm her. "Father, mother, wait for me." Before long, a hot stream of liquid flowed from her nose. Chin Ruoruo's consciousness grew more and more blurry. Suddenly, a pair of hands pulled her up, throwing her out of the bath. The woman punched her stomach hard, and the intense pain forced Chin Ruoruo to spit out the water and take a breath. "Slut, you're trying to harm us." The woman relaxed slightly but was still furious, pinching her several times before raising her foot to kick Chin Ruoruo in the chest. The others quickly pulled her back, saying, "It's fine to hit her, but if you disturb the third prince's enjoyment, it's a big matter. You can take your anger out tomorrow." Saying this, they forcibly shoved a pill into Chin Ruoruo's mouth. "This is a good thing, its effects are so powerful that even the wild wolves wouldn't escape. Just wait, the third prince will definitely throw her out later. Then, you'll get to see this slut begging for men." Chin Ruoruo trembled with hatred. She was not afraid of death, but she feared being humiliated and losing face for the Qin kingdom. But now, even death seemed impossible. The low mutterings of the women made her drop her long lashes, her eyes gradually growing cold. "Third prince." A voice from the door interrupted, and the women hurriedly threw some clothes on Chin Ruoruo, dropping to their knees to greet him. "Leave." The candlelight in the room dimmed as the women quickly extinguished most of it, leaving only a faint glow that illuminated Chin Ruoruo's figure. She wore only a large red embroidered corset, half reclining on a snow-white tiger pelt. Her long, black hair spilled over her body, her snowy white skin barely concealed, with her legs crossed like a seductive mermaid, a picture of deadly allure. Yang Jinyuan stepped closer, glancing at her, and his breath hitched. His eyes gradually grew darker. "Jinyuan. For the sake of all these years, can you give me a quick end?" Their familiar name, filled with heartbreaking pain, made Yang Jinyuan's heart ache. Chin Ruoruo lifted her head slightly, her stunning face rippling with tears in her eyes. Her brows furrowed slightly, condensation forming like mist, and a tear that had been hanging on her long lashes finally fell, tracing her cheek and disappearing into her corset. "Shh." Yang Jinyuan's gaze deepened. He closed his eyes, and his throat moved. "Ruoruo, let go of your heart. I told you I'd let you live long and well. Beast." Her final hope shattered, Chin Ruoruo cursed him desperately, hoping to provoke him. The man looked down from above, unfazed by the mockery in her words. His gaze casually swept over the guards outside the tent. After a brief pause, he raised his hand and tore off the last piece of cloth. "No matter how you curse, you'll still end up begging beneath me. That will only excite me further." The humiliating words landed like a slap in her face. Chin Ruoruo forced herself to remain calm, biting her tongue, swallowing the bitter taste of blood to prevent the powerful drug from tearing apart her sanity. With a snap, her wrist was reset, and before she could react, her body was twisted into an unnatural angle and slammed onto the ground, her bones aching as if they were about to break. Even in such pain, she could still hear a few groans escaping from her lips, influenced by the drug. The more intense the pain, the clearer a thought became in Chin Ruoruo's mind. No matter how low she fell, no matter how degraded she became, she would survive, and she would rise again. A single tear fell to the man's fingertip. Yang Jinyuan's finger moved slightly, but he still showed no mercy, ruthlessly ravaging her soft skin. Only when the dawn light began to break did everything gradually calm down. Yang Jinyuan closed his eyes, preparing to rest. He paid no attention to Qin Ruoruo, who had been thrown onto the carpet. Despite her injuries, her face was flushed, and her body continued to writhe uncontrollably. Someone, drag her out. Chapter 3, Ruoruo doesn't cry. The soldier on duty outside had listened to the noise all night and was already feeling restless early in the morning. Upon hearing the order, he almost hesitated for no time at all before rushing in. Seeing the lascivious expression on Qin Ruoruo's face on the floor, he couldn't hold back any longer. But she was, after all, just off the bed of Yang Jinyuan and the princess he had arranged to marry. Even though Yang Jinyuan had said such things, the soldier still feared his anger and faltered, asking, "Third prince, should we drag her out as a reward for everyone or keep her here waiting for you?" Qin Ruoruo struggled to open her eyes, her gaze fixated on the figure in the bed. After a long while, a deep voice finally sounded. "Reward. Yang Jinyuan." Qin Ruoruo collapsed, unable to support herself any longer, her face drained of color as her hand clung to the carpet beneath her, her desperate screams not earning even a glance from the man on the bed. She was dragged away mercilessly by her hair, her fingers being forcibly pried apart. "I heard from Nanian that she was drugged, so everyone will enjoy themselves soon." The soldiers whispered among themselves, and Qin Ruoruo's cries faded away. Yang Jinyuan squinted, his nose still catching the faint fragrance in the air. This scent was something Qin Ruoruo had carried with her since birth. Even now, the fragrance lingered though the beauty was gone. Yang Jinyuan reached out to grab, but it slipped through his fingers. His mind raced, and the faces of women tortured to death in the military camp morphed into Qin Ruoruo's face. His drowsy nerves immediately snapped to attention, and he absent-mindedly twisted the ring on his finger. "Someone," he shouted, "the woman has run away." A commotion broke out outside the room. Yang Jinyuan's eyes turned cold, and he jumped off the bed, rushing outside. He grabbed a soldier by the collar and demanded, "What's going on?" The princess suddenly hurt someone and jumped into the pond. Even without considering the low temperature of Yang country, the water outside would freeze instantly even if boiling water was poured into it. Not to mention the cold pond, which was icy even in summer. He remembered that Qin Ruoruo could not swim. His thoughts raced as his feet carried him swiftly to the gathered crowd. He saw a woman clinging to an ice floe in the freezing pond, trembling and barely staying afloat. Several times she almost slipped under the surface. Her exquisite face was frozen purple, though her cheeks were oddly flushed red. Yang Jinyuan originally thought Qin Ruoruo must have wanted to end her life from shame, but seeing her struggling to hold on, her hands frozen and covered in blood clots, it seemed she didn't want to die. She was instead trying desperately to survive. He lightly tapped his toes and flew over, catching the woman and pulling her into his arms. By the time they reached the shore, Yang Jinyuan looked down, and the ice shards had already formed on his boots. The woman in his arms, clad only in a thin undergarment, had visible patches of skin frozen purple, and even her eyelashes were covered in frost. She was a pitiful sight. If he had been a moment later, she might have already been lost. His throat moved as he tightened his grip, his eyes flashing with complexity. "Qin Ruoruo, I warned you. If you dare to seek death, you'll face 100 times more pain." Slowly, Qin Ruoruo opened her tightly shut eyes, and the first sound she made was a soft, intoxicating moan, causing the soldiers around her to stiffen. She quickly bit down on her lip, refusing to let them see her current disheveled state. Clinging tightly to Yang Jinyuan's clothes, despite the immense pain shaking her entire body, she gritted her teeth and said each word with pride, "I am the legitimate princess of Qin country. Even if I freeze to death, I won't let their schemes succeed or give them the satisfaction of laughing at me." Like a phoenix with broken wings, she still held her head high in pride, her face streaked with tears. Her lips, bitten in her effort to endure, bled, and she managed a faint smile, reaching out to embrace Yang Jinyuan. The delicate fragrance enveloped him, making his throat tighten. She whispered softly in his ear, loud enough for everyone on the shore to hear clearly, "I forgot to tell you, every moment with you in bed disgusts me. You should thank those women, or else being in your bed would be unbearably dull." Yang Jinyuan narrowed his eyes, feeling as if all the surrounding eyes were subtly mocking him. With a soft sigh, he coldly mocked, "Ruoruo. You're just asking for more pain." Looking down at the woman in his arms, she had passed out. His hands tightened silently. Summon the doctor. Inside the large tent, people came and went, and several basins of hot water were brought in, all tinged red. Yang Jinyuan stared at them, his hand on the armrest slowly clenching into a fist. How is she? The doctor wiped the cold sweat from his face, shaking his head repeatedly. She was heavily drugged. If we can't relieve the internal heat, she will burn herself alive. In this situation, we must immerse her in the cold pond. But that will make her body extremely cold, and she will find it hard to bear children in the future. In addition to the severe frostbite, I can't predict any other after effects. We will only know once she wakes up. Do everything you can to treat her, no matter the cost. Yang Jinyuan lowered his gaze. His fingers drummed lightly on the armrest, his emotions unreadable. Soon, several nannies and soldiers who had dragged Qin Ruoruo out were brought before him and knelt. Yang Jinyuan narrowed his eyes, sounding indifferent. Who drugged her? They exchanged nervous glances before pushing forward a nanny. Though terrified, she still forced a smile. Old servant acted on her own, thinking it would please the third prince. Acted on your own? By your logic, should I thank you? Now everyone knows I can't even control a single woman. This is the result of your own actions. Yang Jinyuan clapped his hands slowly. Each clap echoed like a death knell, causing the nanny's face to turn even paler. Suddenly, he stopped clapping and, with a cold gesture, sentence her to death, drag her out, drug her the same way, and throw her into the wolf pit. Let her experience the pain of being unable to live or die. Third prince. Third prince. I'm a palace servant, don't you fear that others will doubt your loyalty to the king? Help! R. Listening to the screams and the howls of beasts outside, Qin Ruoruo, still soaking in the tub, clutched her arms, shivering uncontrollably. She was almost there. Just a little bit more, and she would have become the victim of those beasts outside. But when she thought of Yang Jinyuan's murderous rage earlier, a wave of satisfaction surged in her heart. Even the pain in her body seemed to be soothed. Though she may have misjudged people, after all these years, she understood Yang Jinyuan's character. He was proud and cared deeply about his face. She had humiliated him with the one thing he valued most, and she was certain he wouldn't let those responsible go unpunished. The physical pain had long since merged with the chilling numbness, but the hatred and satisfaction inside her crushed her completely. Staring at the ambiguous wounds on her body, she trembled as she tried to scrub herself clean, but she still couldn't shake the feeling of disgust. Bending over the tub, she retched violently. Reaching out, she gently stroked her forehead, just as her mother once did to comfort her. Over and over, she whispered softly to herself, Ruoruo, don't cry. Ruoruo, don't cry. Ruoruo will survive. Chapter 4. Do you like this scene? After tossing and turning all night, the effect of the medicine finally wore off. There was no heater in the tent and the temperature was terribly low. Even the half-melted ice in the bathtub showed signs of freezing again. Qin Ruoruo had lost all feeling in her hands and feet, and could only put on her clothes mechanically and laboriously. The torture of alternating hot and cold had already exhausted her. She leaned against the bathtub, hugged her knees and fell into a light sleep. The rustling sound of footsteps came from far away and then stopped in front of her eyes. Qin Ruoruo was not sleeping well and her long eyelashes trembled slightly. She struggled for a while but was still too tired to open her eyes. Little did he know that seeing her like this, Yang Jinyuan suddenly became inexplicably angry. He gave an order without mercy, wake him up with boiling water. The boiling hot water was poured on the face and body, causing the person who was originally sleeping to scream and wake up instantly. The frostbitten scars were suddenly burned with pain by the scalding heat and then turned into a severe itch. Before she could react, he dragged her in front of Yang Jinyuan and made her kneel on the ground. Yang Jinyuan sat condescendingly on the newly laid wolf skin, leaning against a stool with a heater in his hands, looking over expressionlessly, with a reserved and distant look. Don't move. If the girl's wound is broken, the flesh will fall off the bone, and then it won't just be a scar. If you don't want to cripple your hand, just stay still. After hearing the instructions, Qin Ruoruo stopped struggling and just took a deep look at the old woman who left after speaking. He raised his head high again and looked into Yang Jinyuan's eyes. She had not forgotten how she had humiliated Yang Jinyuan in front of the Yang soldiers yesterday. There was no need to guess that these people were here to call her to task. Handing the hand warmer to the person next to him, Yang Jinyuan clapped his hands, lifted his robe, and slowly squatted down. He pinched Qin Ruoruo's chin with his slender fingers and looked at her carefully. You slept soundly, but have you forgotten that you are now a prisoner? Do you know that I didn't sleep well for a single day in the 10 years I was in Qin? All I thought about was how to survive the humiliating days as a hostage and how to complete the mission and return home. Now you are also controlled by others. Do you feel 1/10 of the pain I felt back then? Ruoruo. Qin Ruoruo's eyes narrowed. Little did she know that Yang Jinyuan's mental journey over the past 10 years had been like this. She naively thought that the time they spent together was the most beautiful memory, but the whole Qin palace clearly took good care of him. Even her mother would instruct the eunuchs to replace their household supplies in Yang Jinyuan's residence in time when the season changed, and allowed him to study and practice martial arts like an ordinary prince. 10 years have not warmed this cold-blooded heart. In the beginning, it was you, the Yang state, who wanted to send you here as a hostage. You used you as a pawn with impure motives and bad intentions. No matter what happened to you, it was all your own fault. Why do you hate the great Qin now? Even though she was pale and bloodless, Qin Ruoruo tilted her head. The corners of his mouth raised and revealed a beautiful arc of sarcasm. Oh, you dare not. You used the blood of my great Qin to pretend to be a loyal dog in front of your father. Unfortunately, if he valued you, he would never have chosen you as a chess piece, because you are useless to him. If the plan fails, you will be that lowly and pitiful hostage forgotten by your Yang state for the rest of your life, and you will be left to fend for yourself. What do you know? You were born a darling of heaven, how can you understand? You have never understood. Yang Jinyuan's eyes were dazed and he muttered to himself. My breath suddenly stopped, and the man in front of me slowly tightened his grip. The feeling of suffocation and oppression brought by her neck being strangled made her eyes instantly bloodshot, and as the force tightened inch by inch, even her bones made a creaking sound. But Qin Ruoruo seemed not to be afraid of death. The smile on her face was unyielding, but instead showed a sense of satisfaction and pride. His hands suddenly loosened, and Qin Ruoruo fell to the ground in a mess. His chest made a whirring sound like a broken drum as he struggled to breathe in air again. I felt a tearing pain on my head and was forced to look up. Yang Jinyuan's lips fell on her earlobe and rubbed it gently. The soft whisper was like a lover's whisper. Ruoruo, don't provoke me again, otherwise I really don't know what I will do to you. As he spoke, he hugged the person in his arms and covered him with his big banner. Just like that, he took Qin Ruoruo out of the tent as if he was holding a doll. It's already daybreak. Compared to the Yang State military camp in the night, it is even more terrifyingly cold here during the day. The rows of soldiers in training, each wielding a cold spear, stared at her as if she were meat on a chopping board. Yang Jinyuan took her up to the platform step by step. Holding Qin Ruoruo's face with his hands, he looked down. Ruoruo, you see, it only takes time, and everything will be covered up like this heavy snow. No one will care how we, Dian, conquered the world. History will only remember the victorious side. The ground as far as the eye could see was already covered with a thick layer of snow, which had completely buried the bright red of yesterday's massacre and obscured all traces. As if nothing had happened. With a wave of his hand, Yang Jinyuan held her and sat on the high seat. The seats below were already filled with pure-blooded nobles of Yang State with different expressions. Under the command of the great general, Qin Ruoruo was only wearing a single piece of clothing. Her cold body and Yang Jinyuan's hot body were tightly pressed together as if they were conjoined, which was extremely ambiguous. Let the people below look and spy on you. Her heart was filled with surging hatred. Qin Ruoruo waved her hands and struggled desperately, but the disparity in physical strength meant that all her small movements were neutralized. Let me go. Ruoruo, I remember that you loved watching operas the most in the past. Do you know what kind of operas we usually watch for entertainment in Dian? As soon as the words fell, countless drum beats sounded with a shocking momentum. Countless beautiful maids poured out from everywhere, piled all their tables with delicious food, and performed wild blessing dances for prayers on the field. Qin Ruoruo remained expressionless. But gradually his expression relaxed and he realized something was wrong. In the hunting ground below the stage, as a cage was opened, countless captured Qin citizens were driven out of the cage and looked around helplessly. Little did he know that the cage of the wild beast not far away was quietly opened. Chin Ruoruo's throat seemed to be blocked, and a strong sense of uneasiness surged in her heart. He clenched his hands into fists involuntarily and roared loudly, trying to warn the people below who were unaware of the danger they were about to fall into. Run! You guys are running around. The roar was heard by the servants below. When they looked up and saw Chin Ruoruo, they showed a happy expression but were suddenly knocked to the ground. Before they could react, they were bitten on the throat by the vicious wolf released nearby. Screams rang out one after another. When they realized what was happening, they tried to flee in all directions, but they were trapped in a fenced enclosure and no matter how they ran, they could not escape their predetermined fate. You're crazy, you're crazy. Chin Ruoruo was almost on the verge of collapse and pounded Yang Jinyuan frantically with her hands. These people were not even maids or servants who came with the dowry, they were clearly just ordinary people of her great Qin. Why did he appear here and be treated as a human beast for the amusement of the Dian nobles? Hush! Yang Jinyuan placed his long fingers on Chin Ruoruo's lips, forcing her to keep silent. He lowered his head and pressed it against her ear, as if rubbing her ears in hell, but every word he said was as cruel as that of the devil. Chapter 5 You are worthless. These are your people living at the foot of the imperial city. I have brought back thousands of them. Ruoruo, do you know? While you were in the wedding car in front, looking forward to our future, these people were being detained and marched forward 5 miles away from you. Do you like this scene? The Yang nobles clapped and laughed excitedly in his ears, and his subordinate pressed against Yang Jinyuan's body and could feel the man's chest shaking with laughter. Chin Ruoruo turned her head numbly, looking at the faces of these people and the hunting ground that was mostly dyed red. He trembled all over and suddenly exerted a force, slapping Yang Jinyuan hard on the face. The huge slapping sound made the laughter on the podium disappear. All that was left was the endless wailing from the audience. Yang Jinyuan's inky eyes were filled with bloodthirsty depth as he glanced at Chin Ruoruo for a long time without saying a word. Just when Chin Ruoruo thought that Yang Jinyuan would draw his knife and kill her in the next second, the man suddenly curled his lips and chuckled, "Come on, release another cage of children." Seeing Chin Ruoruo's disbelief, Yang Jinyuan slowly wiped the blood from the corner of his mouth, and used his fingers to slowly twist his ambiguous smile. "Don't worry, Ruoruo, I won't kill you. I also know that you are not afraid of death, but you make me unhappy and embarrass me in front of these people. Naturally, I will get it back from the people you care about." Looking at the tender face of the ignorant child biting his hand in the wooden prison cart being pushed out, Chin Ruoruo was extremely anxious. "Yang Jinyuan, let them go." Reaching out and grabbing Yang Jinyuan's arm, Chin Ruoruo didn't care about anything else. She knelt down and bowed her head to Yang Jinyuan for the first time. She bowed her waist deeply and said, "Those children and civilians are innocent. Let them go. You can do whatever you want to me. Don't vent your anger on these people." I thought she would be firm to the end, but I didn't expect her to beg him so humbly. Yang Jinyuan looked at Chin Ruoruo kneeling at his feet humbly, without any happiness on his face, but a flash of disappointment crossed his eyes. Everyone around was watching this scene quietly. With a hint of teasing on his lips, Yang Jinyuan looked into her eyes and said word by word, "Why should I let them go? Just because you kowtowed? Forget it, Chin Ruoruo, your knees are worthless now. Because of you?" Chin Ruoruo took a deep breath and pointed at the group of people under the stage. Her brain quickly calmed down and she quickly found a reason to stop the impending catastrophe. These people were indeed the people of my great Qin before, but now the great Qin is gone. They have become ownerless, and if you make good use of them, they will all be your most loyal people. Seeing the mockery in Yang Jinyuan's eyes, he became even more sarcastic. Chin Ruoruo's hands trembled, and she continued to speak calmly. "My father said that it is because of the people that we have a country, and it is because of the people that we have productivity, food, power, etc. He who wins the hearts of the people wins the world. I don't need their hearts. Even today, you still don't understand that the fear gained by absolute strength is more effective than any public opinion." As he spoke, Yang Jinyuan sneered, "Ruoruo, the people's will and sincerity cannot withstand the bloody swords and guns. They are even less able to withstand the interests." Unfortunately, Chin Ruoruo didn't understand the deeper meaning of those words. Why did the king of Yang enter the city of my Qin state, but only leave you in this bitter cold place? Even if you sacrifice 10 years of your life as a hostage, you are the one who contributed the most to this play, aren't you? Qin Ruoruo slowly stood up from the prone position, looked fixedly at Yang Jinyuan, and quickly analyzed in her mind what she had seen and heard in the past 2 days. Analyzing the turbulent political situation in Dian that I had learned about before. Yang Jinyuan, stop deceiving yourself. No matter how much you have done, the person the king of Yang wants to pass the throne to is not you. This is because you have no roots in Yang state, and your mother has no family to support you. Seeing the murderous look flash across Yang Jinyuan's eyes, Qin Ruoruo's heartbeat slowed down a beat, but her guess became more certain. She hit the nail on the head about the thorn in Yang Jinyuan's heart. But I can make these people loyally submit to you and become the force for you to seize the torch of power. I can also make you rise higher and higher with the support of the people, and let the throne of Yang be passed on to you openly. You know, being afraid of others does not mean true submission. A city filled with fear is like a bubble that can easily collapse from the inside. You yourself are in danger of dying, yet you're still wasting your time talking to these people. Yang Jinyuan held his forehead with his fingertips, sneered and shook his head repeatedly. Qin Ruoruo frowned and stood up slowly, because I am the only legitimate princess of the Qin dynasty. As long as I am alive, I cannot watch the people being implicated by me. Her thin body stood straight. Although she was only wearing a single layer of clothes in the cold wind, her awe-inspiring pride made Qin Ruoruo look like a blood-soaked phoenix about to spread its wings. Even though she had become a prisoner and was ridiculed and looked down upon. But no one can deny that her princess's noble and unyielding demeanor has not been affected in the slightest. Yang Jinyuan's eyes became increasingly deep, and his subordinates slowly clenched their hands into fists. Turning around to look at the Qin people, most of whom were killed or injured, some of them had already spotted Qin Ruoruo in the stands. Ignoring the beast behind him, he ran to the cage without caring about his own life, and wailed at the top of his lungs, "Princess, don't ask for these bastards." Princess. What's worse, for fear of implicating Qin Ruoruo, he gave up resistance, stopped running for his life, and put his head into the bloody mouth of the ferocious wolf, dying bravely. The ruler and the people are truly of one mind, but what a pity. Yang Jinyuan's Adam's apple rolled up and down, revealing a hint of mockery. In that case, it's up to you. But Ruoruo, I'm afraid I have to subvert your cognition today and teach you a good lesson. Let you know how ridiculous your so-called people's hearts and loyalty are. Turning the ring on his finger, Yang Jinyuan pondered for a moment and hummed softly, "It's not difficult to let them go, but you must find other ways to make Zungui of Yang happy, otherwise it won't work if they are unwilling to let them go. Qin Ruoruo, you must know that the people of Yang are bold and unrestrained, and they can't be pleased with the pretentious methods of your Qin. I'm afraid that you can't protect yourself, and now you are even more worried about yourself." Hearing the relaxation in Yang Jinyuan's words, Qin Ruoruo let out a breath. She was already in the fire, so how could she bring disaster upon herself? Looking back at the unruly and bloodthirsty Yang nobles behind her, Qin Ruoruo raised her head. Seeing the people in the audience being put back into the cage, the wolf was also pulled back. Suddenly, there were dissatisfied curses from the audience. Why stop? Let them keep running and fighting. Yang Jinyuan didn't say anything, just leaned lazily in his chair and looked at Qin Ruoruo. The nobles looked at Qin Ruoruo one after another and immediately understood where the problem lay. All the dishes and chopsticks in front of them were thrown at him, and some even pulled out their knives and were ready to take action. Qin Ruoruo seemed to be deaf and blind. She took a deep breath, raised her leg and stepped on the table in front of Yang Jinyuan. She bent her waist, like a butterfly ready to fly, ready to dance at any time. Chapter 6, Alluring Dance. Etc. Qin Ruoruo lowered her eyes and looked at Yang Jinyuan quietly, not understanding what he meant. "You're wearing this to please my warriors." Yang Jinyuan ran his fingers over Qin Ruoruo's pure white inner garment and shook his head with disapproval in his eyes. After clapping his hands, the servant soon presented a long-sleeved dance dress made of gauze and placed it in front of Qin Ruoruo. "Ruoruo, put it on and dance for me like you did before." This dance dress was found in her dowry box. In order to let her dance freely in front of her beloved, her mother found 20 silkworm nurses and spent a month to make it using silk cocoons. From top to bottom, it transitions from the white of clouds to the colorful sunset. Unexpectedly, the first time she took it out, she had already turned from Yang Jinyuan's princess into the lowest woman in Yang state. Qin Ruoruo's fingers trembled slightly as she gently stroked the dance skirt. He suddenly hugged the clothes in his arms, closed his eyes and forced back the tears. Okay, I'll change. When she returned to the field, the messy place had been completely cleaned up. There were fire pots and several strangely shaped drums around. The seats were separated by layers of bright red gauze curtains. It not only blocked the faces of the ferocious young warriors below the stage, it also blocked the figure of Yang Jinyuan on the high platform. Although I don't know what the deep meaning of this arrangement is, but it did make Qin Ruoruo feel a little more at ease. The drum beats sounded, Qin Ruoruo raised her arms, stepped on tiptoes, and suddenly danced to the melody. The cold wind was raging, snowflakes were falling, and it seemed that the only thing in the world was the white snow on the ground and her. As she dances and waves her sleeves, she looks like a fairy descending to earth, extremely beautiful. The drum beats became faster and faster, and Qin Ruoruo's rotation became faster and faster. Her long black hair naturally fell at her side, and her feet kept stepping to the drum beats as her dance moves changed. But her chest seemed to contain a sharp blade. The drum beats were like a death warrant, hitting her heart and causing her to have palpitations. She gradually became breathless and suddenly her eyes were filled with deep darkness. A scene of mass killing appeared before my eyes. Her mother, her father, and her people fell before her one after another. Her movements became more and more wild unconsciously, and every beat was stepping on the blood of her loved ones. Qin Ruoruo's heart seemed to be about to jump out of her chest. Her feet were spinning and bleeding, but she still kept spinning like a puppet. The sound of a piano pierced through the darkness. Qin Ruoruo suddenly woke up from the hallucination, and after a slight pause she regained her breathing and rhythm. Just one song. Qin Ruoruo was still in shock. If it weren't for the zither, she would have been distracted by the drum beats and gone crazy. I searched for the source of the sound, but saw a maid hurriedly leaving behind a gauze curtain holding a guqin. The sound of applause rang out from the podium, and all the surrounding furnishings were removed. Yang Jinyuan clapped his hands and walked down step by step, his eyes focused on her with a deep and terrifying look. How about this dance, warriors? The audience was talking and laughing about Qin Ruoruo's dance just now. Only Yang Jinyuan's eyes fell on her pale face, looking at her with interest. That piano just now, wasn't it? What piano? Before Qin Ruoruo could finish, Yang Jinyuan interrupted her coldly, lowered his eyes indifferently, picked up her sleeves and played with them in his hands. That was really exciting just now. The man's face suddenly approached, and his voice was low. Those drums are made of the skulls of sinners who have committed serious crimes. If people without skills hear them, their minds will be confused and their bodies will explode and die. You are really lucky. After saying that, he raised his hand to wipe a bead of sweat from the tip of Qin Ruoruo's nose, and twisted it on his fingertips with a chuckle. In fact, Qin Ruoruo had already given up the idea when she first thought of the piano sound, and it was related to Yang Jinyuan. Since Yang Jinyuan wanted to see her make a fool of herself, there was no way he would help her. Not to mention, such gentle and unrestrained piano music cannot be produced by the state of mind of the person in front of you. There is only sickness and cold-bloodedness in Yang Jinyuan's heart. Third prince, when will you get tired of playing with such a beautiful woman and give her to us? We are tired of playing with the women in the Qin palace, but the princess has not tasted the freshness yet. Since this title has been given, it must be worthy of the name. The dirty words made Qin Ruoruo's expression freeze. Yang Jinyuan snorted coldly and waved his sleeves. He slowly turned around and glanced at the person who was speaking, and said faintly, "No hurry. Do you think it's worth it to exchange the life of the slave below for the dance just now?" After a few whispers, one representative drank their wine in his glass and waved his hand generously. They are just some worthless defeated soldiers. It's not impossible to let her pick a few to keep. Qin Ruoruo felt relieved. Yang Jinyuan sneered and stared back at her, throwing the question back. Ruoruo, tell them yourself how many lives your dance has cost. This one sentence put Qin Ruoruo at the center of public criticism again. Qin Ruoruo endured the scrutiny, raised her head and spoke slowly, "Everything." For a moment, the whole place was silent, and the only sound was the whistling wind. Then there were bursts of deafening laughter. All. Har har har, is she going crazy from that drumming? Who does she think she is? Listening to these taunts, Qin Ruoruo remained motionless, her thin body stood straight, and she continued in a cold voice, "I said, I want to exchange all their lives and let them survive. Realizing Qin Ruoruo's seriousness, everyone fell silent for a moment. Someone pounded the table fiercely and shouted in dissatisfaction, "Nonsense!" As soon as these words were spoken, they caused a strong reaction among the crowd, and countless dissatisfactions almost blew the sky apart. This dance is beautiful, but it is simply unrealistic to think that it could save the lives of so many people. Are you still dreaming of being the legitimate princess of Qin? Don't forget that you are now in the territory of Dian, and you are Madame Qinrui. All kinds of humiliation were unscrupulously directed at Qin Ruoruo. Yang Jinyuan spread his hands with regret and walked back to his high position leisurely. "Ruoruo, you see, just a dance cannot convince the crowd after all. Yang State has always valued meritorious officials. Even when my father came, he could not use his power to force these warriors who won the battle." With her fingertips clasped on her palm, the pain made Qin Ruoruo calm down quickly. Thinking of what Yang Jinyuan had told her about the Yang Kingdom tradition, her eyes suddenly lit up. "Life and death arena." Yang Jinyuan paused. Qin Ruoruo rushed forward quickly, grabbed Yang Jinyuan's sleeve, and spoke quickly as if she had found the direction. "I remember hearing that there is a life and death arena in Yang State. As long as you fight with the beast in the cage, you can make a request if you survive." His eyes suddenly became complicated. Yang Jinyuan clenched his fists and spoke impatiently. "Do you know?" Before he could finish, Qin Ruoruo pushed him away, turned around, and shouted to the warriors watching the excitement off the field, "I want to participate in your life and death arena beast fighting." He raised his head and said to Yang Jinyuan word by word with a firm look in his eyes, "I think, compared to those ants in your eyes, you Yang warriors would rather see the princess of Qin fighting with wild beasts, right?" Chapter 7, Fighting Beasts to Save People. Qin Ruoruo has a very thin figure, and her arms look like they could be broken if she twisted them with enough force. Saying this undoubtedly amused everyone. Except for Yang Jinyuan and her, everyone on the field laughed out loud. No one would be stupid enough to seek death, let alone such a painful way of death. But it has to be admitted that it did arouse the interest of these noble warriors. "Yes, in that case, let's do as the Princess Qin says." A deep female voice was heard, and Yang Jinyuan's face changed. He quickly walked over to support the figure, helped her sit on the seat, and took off his big hat and carefully put it on the woman. "The noble concubine will live forever." Hearing everyone's greetings, Qin Ruoruo's heart moved, and she immediately guessed that the person in front of her was Yang Jinyuan's mother, concubine Ju. It was just that she was promoted to the position of beauty only because she gave birth to Yang Jinyuan. Now, because of Yang Jinyuan's extraordinary achievements, she has been promoted to the status of a noble concubine. As Yang Jinyuan moved, concubine Ju's face was revealed, causing Qin Ruoruo to gasp. In her memory, Yang Jinyuan's mother was the same age as her mother, but the woman in front of her had white hair and skin, like a 60-year-old old lady. She coughed from time to time and looked haggard. Only one pair of eyes was still clear. "You are Ruoruo." Concubine Ju looked at Qin Ruoruo steadily. Her tone was inaudible. "I have heard of your name a long time ago, and I am sure you are extraordinary today. If not, I would have already drunk your cup of daughter-in-law tea. What a pity that fate plays tricks on me." The words, "fate plays tricks on us," made her heart ache, and she couldn't help but clench her sleeves. Qin Ruoruo trembled slightly, her eyes became hot and she almost cried. If she could do it again, she would rather never have gotten married. "I have never met Yang Jinyuan." These 4 words covered up Yang Jinyuan's deception and the blood of so many people who died tragically. "It's really ridiculous." She pulled the corner of her mouth mockingly and looked at the man behind her. "It's nothing to regret. Humans and wolves are naturally not meant to be together." Sensing the oppressive feeling in Yang Jinyuan's gaze, Qin Ruoruo stood there expressionless, not even moving her eyes. "I heard you wanted to fight the beasts and save those people." "Yes. I'm the one who makes the decision." "I agree." "Mother, how can you let this go on? Regardless of status, no distinction between high and low, no distinction between genders, no distinction between ages, this is the tradition of Yang State, have you forgotten?" His hands were patted by concubine Ju. Yang Jinyuan pursed his lips and did not continue speaking, just staring blankly at the thin figure in the audience. Qin Ruoruo vaguely felt that the gaze was being examined on her, sometimes heavily and sometimes lightly, but when she raised her eyes, she caught nothing. Turning her head, Ju continued, "Since the dance is so pleasing to the eyes, I think, the Princess of Qin will definitely be able to bring us some new tricks on this stage. Maybe she can recreate the excitement of 12 years ago. What do you think? Every time she spoke, Ju would hold her lips and cough lightly a few times, and then take a deep breath before she could continue. After hearing what the imperial concubine said, the people in the audience no longer had any ideas and agreed. Even the warriors of Yang state could rarely defeat the ferocious beast. A weak and spoiled princess would probably be bitten clean as soon as she stepped into the cage. No one expected Qin Ruoruo to really bring anything new. But the thought of seeing the princess of the Qin dynasty fleeing in a panic after being chased by a wild beast. These Yang people couldn't help but feel excited. Yang Jinyuan waved his hand, and rows of weapons were placed in front of Qin Ruoruo. Looking at Qin Ruoruo, who lowered her eyes, Yang Jinyuan's eyes turned cold. He raised his hand, grabbed the wine cup on the tray, pinched her chin and drank it. Seeing that she had drunk most of the wine and her face had turned red, he withdrew his hand and smashed the bowl to the ground. Angrily wiping the wine off her chin, Qin Ruoruo felt dizzy from the spicy stimulation. She stared at Yang Jinyuan and gritted her teeth. "You! If you can't even drink the wine of my Yang country, how can you fight beasts?" Yang Jinyuan ignored the resentment in Qin Ruoruo's eyes and pointed at the weapon and said calmly, "According to tradition, you can choose any weapon here. From spears that were much taller than her to plum blossom hidden weapons and silver needles." Knowing that this was the only chance to increase her chances of survival, Qin Ruoruo didn't say much to Yang Jinyuan. Carefully weighing the weapon in front of him, he tried to raise his hand to grab the mace in front of him, but he could only move the mace a little bit after gathering all his strength, and it immediately slipped from his hand due to lack of strength. "Har har har, you can't even hold your weapon, aren't you courting death?" Interesting. Seeing such a beauty acting like a clown is really a different kind of fun. The sneer was merciless, but Qin Ruoruo remained indifferent. She just continued to ponder the weapon in front of her, selecting it carefully. Staring at her waist, which was made even more slender by her dance dress, Yang Jinyuan's eyes flickered and his emotions were unclear. He had been with Qin Ruoruo for 10 years, so he naturally knew that she had never learned martial arts and could not shoot arrows. He is soft-hearted and has never hurt any living being. Letting her fight the wild beasts would only be courting death. "I've chosen it." Qin Ruoruo turned around and held the weapon in her hand, causing another round of sneers. It was a pocket dagger, only the size of a palm. In Yang state, such a weapon was mostly used to peel fruit, but using it for self-defense and fighting wild beasts was simply a fantasy. If you regret it now, it's not too late. Yang Jinyuan twirled his fingertips lightly, his emotions undetectable. Qin Ruoruo ignored him and just searched around for something. Suddenly, her eyes lit up and she picked up a clean chopstick from the table and slowly rolled up her hair that had just fallen down for dancing, revealing her delicate facial features. With her hair tied up like this, she lost some of her terrifying charm, and the coldness of her eyebrows gave her an indescribable sense of boldness. The Yang state was a place of barbaric people with a heroic style, and most of the girls had bronze skin, which lost its softness under the erosion of wind, sand and blizzard. These people had never seen a beauty like Qin Ruoruo. In the past 2 days, they had only seen the maidservants who came with the dowry were as soft as water, but they were nothing compared to Qin Ruoruo. They stared at her movements in a daze, forgetting to put down their wine glasses and barbecue in their hands, and they didn't even react until the wine jug spilled all over them. Noticing the gazes of the people around him, Yang Jinyuan lowered his eyes and adjusted the straps on his arms, but no matter how he adjusted them, he felt uncomfortable. As if consciously isolating herself from everything around her, Qin Ruoruo looked down at the floating long sleeves on her body, unsheathed the dagger, measured it on her body for a few inches, and cut it off without hesitation. With a flash of cold light, the long and flowing sleeves were cut off cleanly and neatly. She raised her hand and threw it out without any reluctance, watching the cold wind blowing the sleeves and ribbons farther and farther away. Qin Ruoruo retracted her gaze, but turned around and almost bumped into the chest of the man who had stood in front of her without her knowing when. "You just ruined this dance dress that's worth a fortune." Yang Jinyuan watched Qin Ruoruo stepping back again and again to keep a distance from him, and the discomfort he felt became even worse. He raised his hand and pinched her wrist to stop her from cutting the hem of her skirt. Qin Ruoruo was slightly surprised. She didn't expect that Yang Jinyuan would care about a dance dress at this moment. She could not struggle any longer and simply raised her voice and said word by word, this dance dress was made by my mother so that I can dance freely in front of the person I love. Now that I have neither a husband nor a lover, this dance dress has no need to exist anymore. It is just a burden. There is no point in keeping it. Chapter 8: Life and Death. Yang Jinyuan frowned. When he came to his senses, Qin Ruoruo had already escaped from his control and was standing there ready to face whatever was about to happen. Get in the cage. I don't know who started knocking on the table first, but then more and more Zungui warriors from Yang State followed suit and responded in unison. The rumbling sounds of knocking and shouting set off waves of applause. Their hunting ground was surrounded by fine iron to form an octagonal cage. Qin Ruoruo walked down the stands step by step and entered the cage. Behind him, there was the sound of the cage door closing tightly, and he was completely imprisoned in this arena. Qin Ruoruo's eyes swept over every inch of the cage, unwilling to miss any detail. Third Prince, what kind of beast do you think should be given to Madame Qianrui? The beast officer asked carefully while holding the whip. When Madame Qianrui's name came out, Yang Jinyuan paused for a moment before he reacted. He always had an inexplicable feeling when the name that he had personally bestowed yesterday was mentioned at this time. The woman's figure in the octagonal cage looked even thinner. Yang Jinyuan tapped his fingers lightly and pondered for a moment, then turned his head and whispered a few words into the beast officer's ear. This. The beast officer couldn't help but open his eyes wide, looking at Yang Jinyuan again and again to confirm whether he had heard it wrong. Seeing the coldness in his eyes, he shuddered and immediately went to do it. This incident caused people around to whisper, and some even started making bets. If it were you, the third prince would have asked the beast officer to release any beast to deal with us. After all, we have been friends for many years, and we just had a good time last night. How could he bear to let a woman like that die? Don't even mention the third prince. Even I, after being awed by Madame Qianrui's eyes, felt my bones go numb. I hope she can survive, so that I can definitely taste this beauty. This hunting ground had been built with great care, so that the conversations of the people in the audience could be heard in the field. Qin Ruoruo clenched the dagger in her hand and looked at Yang Jinyuan from afar, but still couldn't see his expression clearly. Just like the day when she first got married, one was in a superior position while the other was struggling to survive. Looking at each other from afar, I cannot understand your heart. But she didn't think Yang Jinyuan would let her go. As the rumbling sound behind him sounded again, a fishy smell hit him in the face. Qin Ruoruo turned slowly and looked at an animal cage with the black cloth opened, revealing a snow wolf with green eyes flashing coldly inside. This is an animal unique to the state of Yang and is the king of the grassland and snow. Bloodthirsty and brutal, invincible. I once heard Yang Jinyuan say that an adult snow wolf couldn't even gain the upper hand over a restless brown bear that had just emerged from hibernation. An adult pregnant female wolf is more ferocious than any other bird of prey in the world in order to protect her children. Looking at the slightly bulging belly of the female wolf, Qin Ruoruo's lips twitched a little, and then slowly drew an arc. Yang Jinyuan really overestimated her. They actually used snow wolves. It seems that the third prince really hates this woman. The little princess of Qin might not be able to handle an ordinary jackal. This snow wolf has never been defeated. I don't know how many warriors have died at the hands of this beast. Not to mention a pregnant and mad female wolf. When they saw what the beast in the cage was, everyone looked in shock at the man sitting in a high seat, drinking with his head down. The few people who were still speculating about the release of the water just now did not say anything, and they were shivering all over like the beast officer. Yang Jinyuan was the third child in the Yang state. He had been a hostage for many years and had long been forgotten. This time, he directly overthrew the Qin state. He and the king of Yang had planned a self-torture plan for many years and made great contributions. His mother was canonized as a noble concubine, but in the eyes of these people, compared with the prince, he still had no background and foundation, which meant he had no capital to be respected. But at this moment, Yang Jinyuan's decisiveness and cold-bloodedness undoubtedly sounded a warning bell in the hearts of those who had ulterior motives. There was a hint of seriousness in his gaze towards Yang Jinyuan. While Qin Ruoruo was observing the beast in front of her that was about to become her opponent, the snow wolf in the cage was also staring at her, sizing up the person who had broken into the safe area, and its claws were digging in the snow anxiously. Then a wolf howl was heard, and the cage was pulled up by a mechanism. The snow wolf stepped out of the cage and confronted Qin Ruoruo. The beast fight officially begins. The snow wolf slowly approached, staring at Chin Ruoruo with its fierce eyes flashing. Its smelly saliva became longer and longer, dripping onto the ground. Seeing that she didn't move, it jumped up and launched the attack. The scarlet mouth opened so wide that it could almost swallow Chin Ruoruo's entire head. But she remained motionless, as if she was being acupunctured, and watched quietly as the bloody mouth got closer and closer, knocked her down into the snow, and bit her fragile and thin throat. Soon, blood dyed Chin Ruoruo's clothes red. I don't know who sighed first. Everyone already has the answer to the outcome of the game. Although it was not surprising, I was still a little disappointed that I didn't see the scene I wanted so soon. A woman's cry came from under the snow wolf. Just when everyone thought it was Chin Ruoruo's last cry before death, the wolf's howl sounded again, but this time it was a cry of pain. The people on the stage stood up and looked down, and found that the mother wolf's mouth was still wide open, but she couldn't close it no matter what. It turned out that Chin Ruoruo had stuffed her entire arms into the upper and lower jaws of the snow wolf, and the dagger in her hand had pierced through the snow wolf's head. The snow wolf struggled in pain and shook its head rapidly, trying to break free from Chin Ruoruo's hand. Its sharp teeth had already pierced her shoulders and arms, and the blood flowed from these wounds. Chin Ruoruo seemed to feel no pain and clenched her teeth tightly, refusing to let go. The wolf went crazy and simply gritted its teeth and hugged the snow wolf tightly with its hands, feet and whole body, then raised its head and bit the snow wolf's ear. With his other hand, he slowly took out a few silver needles from his arms and stabbed the snow wolf again and again. The snow wolf ran madly in the octagonal cage in pain. It lost its sight and kept hitting the railing like a headless fly. It climbed up awkwardly and turned around, hitting the wall again. Chin Ruoruo bit it tightly with her teeth to avoid being thrown off, repeating the action mechanically. As the snow wolves fled, large amounts of blood spread across the snowy ground, and it was no longer possible to tell which were from the wolf and which were from the human. Apart from the howling of the cold wind and the whimpering cries of the snow wolf, everyone on the field just held their breath and stared at the figures of a man and a beast entangled together below. Finally, after running 3 laps, the wolf seemed extremely tired and showed signs of fatigue first. His steps gradually slowed down and his whole body collapsed on the snow, no longer able to hold up his head. The thin man with bright red hair staggered and pushed the snow wolf away. After propping himself up and pulling his arm out of the wolf's mouth, he slowly turned around and raised his arm. The whole audience suddenly burst into applause. For the first time in 12 years, someone defeated the overlord of the snowy grassland. She is still a delicate little princess who is powerless. No one could help feeling that this was a miracle. The last person who defeated the snow wolf was. Everyone's eyes turned to Yang Jinyuan on the platform. Chapter 9, You Can Take Back the Title. Chin Ruoruo propped herself up and stood up, walking step by step to the edge of the cage, the place closest to the platform. She raised her head with unyielding and cold hatred in her eyes, looking coldly at the arrogant figure on the podium, silently declaring her victory. Countless eyes were looking at him, waiting for him to speak. But only the gaze of the woman in the cage was like a red-hot iron that penetrated everything, inexplicably burning his fingertips and making them tremble. Yang Jinyuan seemed to see the girl in the audience peeling off the soft shell that protected her. The once beautiful and bright girl, no matter where she is, her smiling eyes are like a beam of light that can illuminate even the cold winter and make it warm. But now, these eyes looking at him were even colder than the current winter in Yang State. Concubine Ju, who was standing by, stared at his hands clenched on the chair, her eyes flickering slightly as she reminded him in a gentle voice, Yuana, the winner has been decided. We are all waiting for you to announce the result. Yang Jinyuan's Adam's apple rolled and his expression was startled, but he reacted quickly, frowned tightly, and it took him a long time to find his voice. When he opened his mouth, his voice was so low and hoarse that it was difficult to hear. In that case, what do you want? After a light cough, Yang Jinyuan clasped his fingertips tightly on the ring and emphasized his tone. If you want me to take back the title I gave you, I can. Let them go. Chin Ruoruo wiped the blood off her face, tore off some cloth from the hem of her skirt and bandaged her arm roughly to stop the bleeding. Just a slightly bigger movement caused bouts of dizziness. He paused in the bandaging action, pressed the wound with his fingers, and watched the blood flowing from his fingertips, but there was still no pain, which made him feel a little confused. She had almost never been hurt before, except when she was naughty as a child, and would cry in pain if she accidentally bumped into something. But this time, maybe she was numb, but she didn't even feel a bit. However, Qin Ruoruo soon put this question behind her, raised her eyes and looked at Yang Jinyuan, and continued, everything I did just now was to save these poor people. No matter how many times you ask me, I will only have this answer. At least, give her a chance to atone for her sins. Separate the misfortune that she brought to these people. With this belief, she was not afraid of the ferocious snow wolf. In that case, then it's as you wish. I just hope you won't regret it in the future. After a long silence, Yang Jinyuan chuckled and nodded to the people below. All the cages holding the Qin people were opened one after another. However, the people were already frightened by what they had experienced in recent days, and they saw enemies everywhere. At this time, even if the cage door was opened, they would not dare to come out. They were afraid that a ferocious beast would suddenly appear and tear them apart. Or maybe a sudden attack came from somewhere and directly took the name. Hurry up and go. Qin Ruoruo anxiously held onto the cage, banging on the frozen iron cage with her hands, making a banging sound. He tried to wake up the person in the cage by explaining again and again, but his face was numb and he had no sense of touch, perhaps because it had been frozen for too long. But he still tried to force out a smile, and tried his best to soothe the people's emotions in a gentle voice. It's okay, you are all safe, go home quickly. A few brave ones took a few cautious steps out of the cage. He closed his eyes in fear, waited for a while, and opened his eyes cautiously. As expected, he did not see any danger. He cheered and called out to his family and friends to come out of the cage. As the fear in the eyes of these simple faces faded away, Qin Ruoruo's heart surged and she felt that it was all worth it. Thank you, Princess, for saving my life. Princess Hongfu. The people in front of them were all those who had seen the fight between Qin Ruoruo and them just now. In their eyes, the darling of heaven was willing to risk her life and fight hard for their freedom. Regardless of age, everyone knelt down and saluted. They kowtowed to express their gratitude, just like a drowning man grabbing a straw to survive, and worshipped her as a god in the world. A small figure walked out of the crowd and placed a wrinkled wild flower next to the cage. That small, bright yellow flower is like a seed, taking root in the heart. Qin Ruoruo felt a surge of excitement in her heart, and a warm current slowly flowed out from her heart. Her originally exhausted body was instantly filled with strength again. The scene before her made everything she had done worthwhile. In the past, she only knew how to live a life of luxury in the harem, and she tried every means to escape from her father's inspection of her homework. She subconsciously thought that those obscure and boring policies for governing the country had nothing to do with her. Even her passionate persuasion in front of Yang Jinyuan was just shallow talk. At that time, she only wanted to marry the person she loved. When it comes to saving the lives of these people, it is really vulgar and ridiculous. But now the people support. At this moment, she really felt responsibility, the responsibility that a princess should bear. But where is our home? A small and light question interrupted the wonderful atmosphere. With a smile frozen on her face, Qin Ruoruo watched as an ignorant child spoke, and the others opened their mouths as if they had just woken up from a dream. In an instant, frustration, disappointment, and wailing swept through the group of people who had just been rescued like a plague. These people looked to her for help, waiting for Qin Ruoruo, the savior in their eyes, to give them a direction to survive. Qin Ruoruo's throat tightened and she tightly gripped the iron cage in front of her. She wanted to say something, but she couldn't utter a reassurance that would reassure people. The Qin dynasty is gone. The dynasty was defeated. How could she give these people a guarantee when even she was imprisoned? Ruoruo, since you have given them freedom, these people will never be able to step on the territory that belongs to our Yang state again. Yang Jinyuan spoke mercilessly, shattering these people's bubble-like fantasies at once. Whether it's here or the former capital of your Qin state thousands of miles away, they all belong to Great Yang. After 3 days, if anyone still steps on the territory of Yang state, they will be killed without mercy. No you. Qin Ruoruo was extremely nervous. These people are just ordinary people, unarmed and with their families. After days of hunger and torture, it was almost difficult to even stand. Even if we ride a horse, it will take at least 7 days to leave here. Yang Jinyuan clearly wanted to see them look so humiliated and hopeless on purpose. Across the crowd, Qin Ruoruo saw the cruelty in Yang Jinyuan's eyes. She suddenly remembered that Yang Jinyuan had just said that he would teach her a lesson. A feeling of uneasiness instantly filled my heart. The people, who had originally calmed down, suddenly burst into tears. Someone muttered something, but it was loud enough for everyone in the arena to hear. Instead of dying like this, it's better to be a slave in a cage. At least there's food and drink, and it's warm to be crowded together. Even if we're dragged to the Colosseum, we don't know when it will be our turn. If we're lucky, we can still survive. I heard from the guards who were on night watch last night that she has not married the third prince, and her status is even lower than that of a military prostitute. I just heard someone call her Madame Qian Rui. If she hadn't wanted to marry into Dian, how could we have lost our home? Chapter 10. You may regret it. The people who had been so kind and respectful to her just now turned their eyes and glared at Qin Ruoruo. This made her feel nervous and she stepped back step by step. Gradually, the curses became louder and louder, turning her from a princess who saved people into a scourge that brought disaster to the country and the people. She only regretted that she did not die in the mouth of the snow wolf. Qin Ruoruo noticed with her sharp eyes that the few people who had just aroused public anger looked at each other and nodded, then silently faded away from the crowd, wiped the mud off their faces, took off their clothes, and turned into palace maids of Dian. I immediately understood that all this was done intentionally by Yang Jinyuan. But just these few words of provocation could turn the gratitude of these people into nothing and turn it into a weapon that hurts people. Looking back, Yang Jinyuan had walked down from the platform at some point and was staring at her through the cage. Qin Ruoruo wanted to rush out of the cage, her clenched teeth filled with hatred. It's you. Ruoruo, I said I would subvert your cognition and teach you a good lesson. This is just the beginning. I reached out and grabbed a handful of snow, and without much effort I saw the snowflakes drifting away and turning into debris on the ground. It was just like what Qin Ruoruo kept saying, that the people's hearts were loose and powerless. What else are you going to do? Sensing the sarcasm in his words, Qin Ruoruo staggered a few steps, held onto the railing tightly and asked again and again, but Yang Jinyuan remained silent except for a mysterious smile. There was another commotion among the mob. Following Yang Jinyuan's gaze, baskets of steaming cooked potatoes were carried up and placed in front of the hungry Qin people. This is not the end yet. Then bowls of cooked white meat with alternating fat and lean meat were brought up. Several other brocade boxes were opened in front of everyone, revealing white silver and several land deeds lined up in a row. The pairs of eyes that were originally dull and lifeless stared at these things closely. The fragrance and the light of money were like seductive hands, stirring the hungry hearts of these people, and they swallowed their saliva involuntarily. I am not a cold-blooded person. As long as some of you are willing to surrender and declare that you will never be loyal to Qin again, you can get food, drink, and shelter. You can eat and take what is in front of you. The more loyal you are, the more you can get. With their bony hands clasped together, Yang Jinyuan stood there with dignity. She was like a savior, offering generous temptations as soon as she opened her mouth, stimulating the people below. But after hearing the statement, these people were unsure what it meant, and no one dared to move for a while. Suddenly one of the children couldn't stand the feeling of hunger anymore. He locked his eyes on the steaming food, swallowed his saliva, and slowly walked to the cage. After hesitating for a moment, he spat at Qin Ruoruo. Then he quickly walked to Yang Jinyuan and kowtowed heavily. After standing up, he took out a hot potato from the basket and started to bite it into big bites. Although there was a distance between them, the filth that was spat out did not touch her. However, Qin Ruoruo's face still lost all color. In an instant, she felt as if she was thoroughly drenched in ice water. Her heart was chilled and her whole body began to tremble uncontrollably. With the first example set, the rest of the people followed suit, lining up to show their favor in front of Yang Jinyuan. Looking at those people with different expressions, some of whom didn't even dare to look at each other, and the people who hurriedly completed the process and wolfed down their food, Qin Ruoruo slowly closed her eyes. Suddenly, she felt a pain in her shoulder. Someone picked up a snowball from the ground, turned it into an ice ball, and threw it at her. Then he quickly took the silver and the title deed from the brocade box into his arms. With someone taking the lead, snowballs and stones were thrown in through the cage. The pain from being hit quickly spread throughout the body, like falling into an ice cellar, causing suffocation. Qin Ruoruo stood straight for a long time and saw that the little flower had been trampled and crushed into pieces countless times. It became a dirty yellow spot on the ground. Unable to hold on any longer, he slowly collapsed backwards onto the snow. He clutched his chest and gasped violently, staring absent-mindedly at the snowflakes floating in the sky, and opened his mouth and sobbed loudly. A shadow fell on her face. Yang Jinyuan was already standing in the cage, staring down at her with deep meaning in his eyes. Now, do you regret it? The light in Qin Ruoruo's eyes was extinguished in an instant. After a long period of silence with a pale smile, she chuckled and said, "You win. Yang Jinyuan. I'm tired." Then he could no longer hold on and closed his eyes in exhaustion. "Someone come." The hands in his sleeves trembled slightly, and Yang Jinyuan coldly ordered someone to carry Qin Ruoruo back to the tent. Staring at the human-shaped bloodstain on the ground, Yang Jinyuan raised his hand and scattered the powder in his sleeves into the air, which dissipated without a trace in the wind. He raised his head and looked in the direction where Qin Ruoruo had lost her mind just now. All I could see were endless dark clouds hovering overhead, bringing a suffocating sense of oppression. The noble warriors on the platform had already left. Concubine Ju sat there, staring at the chair next to her that was missing a relief, sighed softly, and left the hunting ground. When most of the people had left, Yang Jinyuan took the bow and arrow from the side, aimed at the few people who were still counting silver, and shot. The bright red arrows pierced through people's hearts one after another. Looking at the disbelief in those people's eyes, he still held the silver tightly and refused to let go until he fell to the ground. Yang Jinyuan's handsome face showed a deep disdain. "You don't know how to live or die. Ruoruo, if you marry me, I will take you on a horse ride every day. We will go to the Gobi Desert to watch the stars together, catch wild rabbits and roast them for you to eat. When you are tired, you can lie on the grass, and when you are thirsty, drink a sip of the sweet water from the moon spring. I will make you the happiest bride." In the afterglow of the setting sun, the young man in blue stood under the crabapple tree with his arms outstretched and a smile on his lips, watching the girl in pink clothes swinging on the swing. His eyes were filled with a tenderness that could make one drown in it. "Jump down, Ruoruo, I'll catch you. As long as I'm here, I won't let you get hurt again." But in the blink of an eye, the petals all over the ground turned into bloody sharp thorns. The young man just now also turned into a cold and heartless figure on the podium. Qin Ruoruo wanted to scream madly, but the most familiar figure never turned back to look at her. Countless hands pulled her like shackles leading directly to hell. The porcelain white person on the bed was now pale and bloodless. There were faint bruises under the swollen eyelids. Even in sleep, he was still having uneasy dreams. Occasionally, he would sob softly at intervals, but there was no sign of waking up. It was obvious that he was exhausted physically and mentally to the extreme. "Yang Jinyuan, brother Jinyuan." The plaintive voice was particularly noticeable in the quiet tent. The man standing in front of the bed had a complex expression on his face that quickly disappeared. He turned to look at the doctor kneeling on the floor and asked, "What's wrong?" Chapter 11 Awakening. This. The medical officer raised his head cautiously to glance at Yang Jinyuan's expression, hesitated for a moment before slowly speaking. "Madame Qian Rui is overly frightened and worried, and has suffered repeated blows in a short period of time. Coupled with the loss of physical strength and injuries, the situation is not optimistic. Take this hand for example, the beast's teeth almost bit off the meridians in her arm. After training and repair, she can barely hold a pen and write, but delicate work such as embroidery is probably difficult. When the arm was in the cage, the sleeve was stained with blood, and only large patches of bright red could be seen. Now the cloth is cut open, revealing a slender wrist, and the yellow-white texture of the skin is shocking." While the medical officer was stitching up the wound, he couldn't help but sigh, thanks to the medicine added to the strong liquor that Madame Qianrui drank earlier, which numbed her nerves. Otherwise this spoiled girl would have died of pain from such a serious injury. The speech stopped abruptly. The candle in front of the medical officer broke silently and went out, leaving only a wisp of green smoke that slowly dissipated. "Watch your mouth. I think you should know clearly what to say and what to keep to yourself. If I hear anyone mention the wine, I don't know if you can still keep your head above water." The man's cold voice interrupted the medical officer's chattering, and he turned the ring on his hand and looked at. His eyes looked eerie scarlet in the candlelight, making him look even more fierce and majestic. "If she doesn't recover and accept my grace within a month, I will hold you responsible." "Yes." The medical officer couldn't help but shiver, and felt a chill on the back of his neck. He knelt down hurriedly to pay his respects, then hurried out of the tent to boil the medicine. Soon, only Yang Jinyuan and Qin Ruoruo were left in the tent. The person on the bed was already very thin, and now lying there, if it weren't for the faint sound of breathing, it would be almost impossible to tell that there was someone lying there. Yang Jinyuan stood quietly for a long time, then slowly bent down to look at Qin Ruoruo. His fingertips slid slowly from her dry and pale lips to her neck, feeling the beating of her pulse. Thinking of how she had just called out his name in her sleep with a feeling of grievance, Yang Jinyuan narrowed his eyes slightly. Ruoruo, what did you dream about just now? Yang Jinyuan. Suddenly, Yang Jinyuan froze, his eyes narrowed slightly, and he subconsciously retracted his fingers and stood up straight. Looking closely, the woman on the bed did not open her eyes. Then her stiff body slowly relaxed and she raised the corners of her mouth in a mocking manner. I will kill you. The girl then sobbed softly, causing his originally upright body to pause, and he slowly turned his back. The shadow was cast on the tent by the candlelight, stretched and deformed, and then he laughed softly. That's fine, too. When the human figure disappeared, only the candlelight in the tent made a popping sound. The medical officer was right. Qin Ruoruo was unconscious for so long that she slowly opened her eyes at sunset on the third day. My whole body ached as if I had been run over by a carriage. The pain in her arm was so severe that it almost made her see stars. Looking at the unique exotic totem on the tent above her head, all the things that happened before she fainted were like running water, impacting her nerves. Everything was reminding her clearly that this was not a dream. Whether it was the destruction of the country or the people who suddenly changed their attitude and hated her, it was all true. A figure moved outside the room and then entered the tent. Qin Ruoruo quickly closed her eyes, her heart beating like thunder. Now that you're awake, stop pretending and drink it. The strong smell of herbs made her eyes swell. Qin Ruoruo breathed a sigh of relief when she heard the voice of an elderly woman. Fortunately, it wasn't Yang Jinyuan. He opened his eyes and looked at the old woman in front of him with white hair and dressed like a nanny. His eyes widened. I recognize you. That day, Yang Jinyuan had someone pour hot water on her to wake her up, reminding her not to catch anyone with frostbite. The woman had a dark face with many wrinkles on it, and she looked so fierce that anyone would feel uneasy if they looked at her for a second longer. She stretched out her hand and pushed the bowl of medicine, almost touching it to the tip of her nose. Thinking of what those old women had done to her before, Qin Ruoruo subconsciously shrank her neck and stared at the bowl of medicine warily. My last name is Fang. I was sent here by His Highness. You drank this medicine every day during the 3 days you were unconscious. If you don't cooperate after waking up, I, an old woman, can only find a way to make you drink it. Ignoring Qin Ruoruo's wary look, Nanny Fang placed the bowl of medicine on the table. She picked up the spoon and sat on the bed, ready to start at any time. If you want to die from the wound festering, just go out and jump into the cold pond again, and save me the trouble of having to stay here and face a sick person like you. I drink. Qin Ruoruo gritted her teeth, took the strange-tasting medicine, drank it all in one gulp, and almost vomited. The burning sensation in her throat made her eyes misty. Seeing that she had drunk it, Nanny Fang snorted coldly, put away the bowl, and lighted the charcoal fire in the room again. What a waste of medicinal materials. Ignoring the sarcasm in her words, Qin Ruoruo looked at Nanny Fang carefully. Although she is not good looking and her clothes are not as good as other women, you can see that she is very clean and capable. It's just this temperament. Qin Ruoruo couldn't help but sneer. Yang Jinyuan deliberately chose this difficult old woman, just to prevent him from being bribed by her, and to place a spy around to monitor her. I really think highly of her. Where is Yang Jinyuan? You still call His Highness by his name casually. Ignoring Nanny Fang's rebuke, Qin Ruoruo frowned and raised her injured arm. Your Highness took so much trouble to have someone treat me because he didn't want me to die. Now that I'm awake, don't you have to report to him? If you have anything to say, just tell me. Your Highness is not available to see you. I want to see the wolf. Biting her lower lip, Qin Ruoruo quickly repeated, it's the wolf that I stabbed in the Colosseum. Is it still alive? Although Nanny Fang was somewhat reluctant and looked strange at her request, perhaps Yang Jinyuan had given instructions in advance, so she turned around and took the lead in lifting the curtain, motioning Qin Ruoruo to follow. I felt happy. Qin Ruoruo stood up from the bed, felt dizzy for a while, shook her head, and followed out of the tent. She turned several bends along the way. The snow was still falling heavily outside the house. The palace servants she met on the road always looked at her a few more times when they saw her. After she passed, they began to discuss in low voices. Qin Ruoruo frowned, pretending not to know, and followed Nanny Fang with 1 foot deep and 1 foot shallow until they came to the tent where the animal cages were placed. As soon as she entered, the pungent smell of blood made her almost unable to stand. After seeing the snow wolf panting on the ground clearly, Qin Ruoruo clenched her palms, slowly walked closer and squatted down, blocking Nanny Fang's sight. He stretched out his hand and rubbed the wolf's mouth for a while, then felt a hard spot and applied a little force. Sure enough, I saw a scar from old years. Chapter 12, Saving the Wolf. Qin Ruoruo's eyes were deep. She was standing in the cage at that time, and her mind went blank facing such a ferocious wolf. Suddenly she remembered that in the stories Yang Jinyuan had told her before, there were ways to save oneself when facing wolves on the grassland. Even the desperate move of destroying both himself and the enemy that Yang Jinyuan had inadvertently displayed in front of her before, turned out to be her way to save her life. It was Yang Jinyuan who turned her situation into what it is today. What saved her life in the end were the memories that Yang Jinyuan left her. Qin Ruoruo couldn't help but curl the corners of her lips sarcastically, and a hint of disgust flashed in her eyes. But, if it weren't for this old wound, she wouldn't have been able to stab the dagger so deeply into the wolf's skull with her strength. Is it luck or? Woo-woo, ah-woo. The palms of his hands felt wet, and the wolf lying on the ground slowly opened his eyes without him noticing. The air coming in through his nostrils became increasingly thinner, leaving only the outgoing air. The originally ferocious wolf eyes were now filled with pitiful pleading. Using the limited strength he had, he placed Qin Ruoruo's hand on his bulging belly. Seeking help. Her wound was a penetrating wound. The old wolf would have collapsed long ago. It had been holding on for the sake of the baby in its belly, so even when facing Qin Ruoruo who had hurt it, it lowered its head and asked her to save its child. Someone come here, beast officer. Qin Ruoruo's heart was in a knot. She stood up and ran out quickly. Suddenly I bumped into a warm chest, and before I could react I was hugged in his arms. Ruoruo, why are you so eager to throw yourself into my arms right after you wake up? Can your body handle it? The man's low-pitched teasing immediately drew mocking sneers from the guards behind him. It seems that your highness is too brave, which makes the princess of Qin so impatient. Speaking of which, his highness has not yet shared the ecstasy of the wedding night with the rest of us. When will it be our turn to become the consort of the princess of Qin? Har 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 har. The unbridled humiliation in her ears made Qin Ruoruo's face turn red with anger. The big hand on her waist from behind, hot like a brand, tightly held her waist, pressing her body and Yang Jinyuan's body tightly together. Shameless. Let me go. Qin Ruoruo struggled frantically, ignoring the severe pain from her wound, until the bandaged wound burst and bled due to the violent movement, and she finally managed to escape the man's shackles. She took a few steps back, gasping and staring at the man in front of her. Her eyes, which were usually filled with smiles, were now filled with hatred like a ball of fire. The sound of swords being unsheathed was heard immediately. The guards asked in a low voice, but there was no more joking in their eyes. They stared at Qin Ruoruo with a fierce look, ready to rush over at any time. Your Highness, she is so disrespectful. Why not let me teach her a lesson so that she will remember it? Why? The slender fingers were raised, and a smile flashed across Yang Jinyuan's handsome face. This is what you don't understand. Women are like beasts on the grassland. It's fun to conquer them with some sharp claws. He had a handsome appearance, and his words were spoken with a bad and domineering tone, without any lust. However, after hearing what Yang Jinyuan said, the people behind him also felt that what he said made sense. Staring at Qin Ruoruo's pretty face, a bit of lust appeared in his eyes. I wish I could see through her from head to toe. Ouch. The wolf behind him howled again. Qin Ruoruo no longer maintained a stalemate with Yang Jinyuan and the others. She turned around and squatted down again, but she didn't know where to start as she looked at the increasingly weak snow wolf. She gritted her teeth and could only raise her head to look at Yang Jinyuan, pinning her hopes on him. Save it. Yang Jinyuan, I remember you said that the most revered animal in your Yang country is the snow wolf. It's about to die, and you're just watching from afar. It has a baby in its belly. It lost to you. The strong prey on the weak. Even if it dies, it's its fate. If you want to save it, you have to bear the consequences. Ruoruo, have you forgotten how your people betrayed you before? Yang Jinyuan's voice was low and he sneered fiercely. It was like a basin of cold water poured directly on her head, reminding Chin Ruoruo immediately of the snow and stones thrown at her by her own people that day. It hurt her 10 times more than any other injury. To save or not to save? This wolf was just her opponent who was going to fight her to the death in the ring, but she just couldn't bear it. She was in the cage, and in the eyes of these people, she was just an animal to be played with. As long as there is a slight possibility of survival, it will bow its head and beg her to save its children, even if it is the person who hurt its life. Isn't she the same now? The longer it drags on, the snow wolf's life is lost faster. Chin Ruoruo gritted her teeth and was about to stand up. The snow wolf didn't know where it got the strength from, and suddenly lowered its head and bit its own belly fiercely. He tore the stomach open with one bite. He kept digging the ground with his claws, staring at Chin Ruoruo and urging her anxiously. Chin Ruoruo's nose felt sore, and she realized that the mother wolf had cut open her belly in order to save her child, so that she could take the child out of her stomach. Reaching out her hand, she slowly reached into the belly. Chin Ruoruo couldn't help but gasp when her fingertips touched the snow wolf's sensitive and weak heart. She immediately pulled her hand back. The wolf's blood mixed with the foul smell made her spit out a few mouthfuls of sour water. The people watching the show at the door immediately burst into laughter. This wolf is prematic. Even if we rescue it, it won't survive. A princess who knows nothing and can't even save herself wants to save a beast. How stupid. The corners of Chin Ruoruo's eyes turned red. She took a deep breath, her eyes became more determined, and she once again reached out to grope in the mother wolf's abdomen. Yang Jinyuan stood behind her, staring at the figure kneeling in a pool of blood, his eyes deep and his expression unclear. The mother wolf had her stomach ripped open while she was unconscious, but she wanted to take their child. You have to cut down one more time. Can you lend me a dagger? Is this how you ask for help? It was originally intended to make things difficult. Unexpectedly, Chin Ruoruo softened her tone without hesitation. Third prince, I beg you, lend me the dagger. Yang Jinyuan was slightly startled. He had heard many people call him the third prince, but when Chin Ruoruo called it, he felt an indescribable sense of strangeness. After a pause, he raised his hand and threw a small knife out from his arms. Chin Ruoruo held the knife, closed her eyes without hesitation, and cut the wound. Soon, a skinny little wolf cub, who was almost out of breath, was carried out. Before she could even show a smile on her face, the she-wolf was completely dead. Sorry. Chin Ruoruo spoke softly, her face full of sorrow. If it weren't for her, the snow wolf might have been able to give birth to cubs in the near future. She wanted to save people and fight beasts, pulling this wolf into her originally unfortunate fate. Yang Jinyuan closed his eyes indifferently. This is its fate. If it loses, it will die. It is not worth pitying. Before he could finish his words, he was interrupted by Chin Ruoruo. What about you? Chapter 13. The beast fight 12 years ago. Yang Jinyuan, weren't you chosen to be sent to Daqin because you lost? How could you know that a temporary win or loss would definitely lead to death? Yang Jinyuan's Adam's apple rolled. Chin Ruoruo stood up, carefully hugged the little beast in her arms, raised her chin slightly, lifted the dagger, lowered her wrist and threw it onto the cage beside her. Life and death are undecided, victory and defeat are undecided. Without caring about Yang Jinyuan's expression, he walked out of the tent and returned to the wind and snow. When she returned to her tent, her face was numb from the cold. Chin Ruoruo looked at the cold sweat on her palms and couldn't help but secretly regret her attitude just now. She was now in Yang Jinyuan's hands, surrounded by Yang people everywhere. If she acted impulsively and vented her anger, it would not be worth it if she got angry. Nanny Fang, who was following closely behind her, snorted coldly as soon as she opened the curtain, obviously dissatisfied with her attitude. Chin Ruoruo lowered her eyes and used her fingers to tease the snow wolf cub in her arms, which was wiped clean and pink. At the same time, she began to look around the tent she was in. A large bed and a dining table were all the furnishings in her place. A small brazier in the room was the only source of warmth in her tent. She had discovered when she went out just now that her tent was not in the center, but it was heavily guarded all around, with a sentry every 3 steps and a squad every 5 steps. It's impossible to escape. However, the look in the eyes of those guards who were staring at her just now was still lingering in her mind. Chin Ruoruo had not forgotten the humiliating title that belonged to her. Madame Chinrue. With this title, she could be humiliated by any of the guards around her at any time. Because of her injuries, she is relatively safe now, but the injuries will heal sooner or later. By then, what solutions will she be able to find to deal with it? Have a meal. Nanny Fang brought 2 bowls of food and placed them on the table. She didn't feel hungry unless she mentioned eating. Except for the 3 days of coma during which she was drugged, she hardly ate a single bite of rice since the day of her wedding, and never stopped for a moment to drink a sip of water. Although she didn't expect to be given anything good to eat, Chin Ruoruo walked over and took a look. There was a soup made from a few yellow leaves and greasy bones on the plate. It had become cold when it was brought to her, and bits of oil had solidified on it. A small piece of black, crumbly baked bread was her staple food, but she still frowned. That's all. Nanny Fang, why? These are not enough. Do you still think you are the legitimate princess? To be honest, these are foods that ordinary servants cannot eat. Chin Ruoruo sat at the table without saying a word. She took a bite of the pancake, but couldn't move it. She then took a sip of the soup. The smell of mutton rushed to her and she immediately turned her head away. She endured it again and again before she could stop the churning in her stomach. Nanny Fang sneered repeatedly. The next moment he was slightly stunned. Chin Ruoruo silently scraped the blackened parts of the pancake with chopsticks, broke them into pieces on the corner of the table, and then soaked them in the mutton soup. After a while, the pancake that was originally hard to swallow absorbed the soup, which neutralized the original greasy taste. Chin Ruoruo picked up the chopsticks and took a bite. Under the watchful eyes of Nanny Fang, she finished most of the meal, one bite after another, in a short while. Suddenly he frowned, spat out a black thing from his mouth, and looked at it in front of the candlelight in confusion. Nanny Fang's voice came faintly from behind, "That's a stone." Stone. Given her previous life, she really couldn't understand why there were stones in the vegetables. In our area, vegetables, fruits and melons are extremely precious. Because of the extremely cold weather, we cannot grow them and have to bring them in from outside. Even water is extremely precious. Frozen vegetables will rot if you wash them too cleanly, so it is inevitable that there will be a few small stones mixed in. Chin Ruoruo held the stone in her palm. "If you don't want to eat it, give it to me," the old woman. Nanny Fang was certain that she would not eat if she heard the dish was not clean, so she handed the bowl to her. Seeing Chin Ruoruo actually picked up those leaves, the smile on his face widened. Unexpectedly, Chin Ruoruo only gave her half, said nothing, and swallowed the remaining rotten leaves one bite at a time. Although his expression was somewhat painful, he still maintained the etiquette he had since childhood and chewed in small bites. After eating, Chin Ruoruo tore off the few pieces of meat on the bones and placed them in front of the snow wolf. No matter how she coaxed it, the little wolf wouldn't move at all, and Chin Ruoruo was in a dilemma. Do we have to feed the wolves with soup? As if she had seen through her intention, Nanny Fang cleaned up the dishes and said unhappily, "Such a small wolf will die if you feed it human food. It can only drink milk." "Where's the milk?" Chin Ruoruo's eyes lit up, and she followed behind Nanny Fang, taking one step forward and one step back. "Milk? I advise you not to think about it. This stuff is offered to the nobles. If it was you in the past, no one would say anything if you used it to bathe. But with your current status, you won't even get a share of the charcoal in the tent tomorrow." After being ridiculed, Chin Ruoruo just lowered her head and gently stroked the little wolf in her arms, feeling it eagerly calling out with its mouth and sucking on her little finger instinctively. "If I can't get the milk, the little wolf will die by tonight." Looking around, Chin Ruoruo searched for the blanket she had wrapped herself in when she went out just now. She had no money now, let alone any cotton-padded clothes to keep out the cold. Apart from the thin dress on her body, this blanket was all her warm clothes. While Nanny Fang was packing up, Chin Ruoruo pretended to re-bandage her wound and took the opportunity to slip away. He hurried towards the sheepfold. Night has fallen. I don't know when the snow stopped. Hiding outside the guard's tent next to the sheep pen, Chin Ruoruo waited quietly for her opportunity. The palace servants in the room would drink while on night duty. After drinking their wine to warm their bodies, they would talk more casually and gradually turn the topic to Chin Ruoruo. "Did you see the Chin princess's beast fight the other day? These past few days when I went to the front to deliver things, I could hear Zungui discussing it. I saw the princess's wedding convoy when it arrived. She was so weak, but I didn't expect she had such ability. I watched it, and it was pure luck that he won. The most intense match was the one between the third prince and him 12 years ago. That was the real Snow Wolf King. I heard that it was because of this beast fight that the third prince was taken seriously by the king. Chin Ruoruo was puffing out her cheeks to blow away the snowflakes falling on her eyelashes, preparing to quietly move to a position closer to the sheep pen. When she heard Yang Jinyuan's name, she put her raised foot down again. 12 years ago, Yang Jinyuan was only 6 years old. A 6-year-old child went to fight the Wolf King. She had never heard Yang Jinyuan mention this in front of her. Now she thought about it, when Yang Jinyuan told her stories, how many of those stories were his real experiences. What kind of mood must one be in to adapt the story into one to cheer her up, and talk about the danger of life and death in a light-hearted way? Chapter 14, Masked Man. Chin Ruoruo couldn't help but clench her sleeves. Listening to those frightening moments, she couldn't help but murmured, "Is it really worth risking your life just for ambition?" The third prince is not doing this for ambition, but for his mother. A low and hoarse voice sounded behind Chin Ruoruo, and the warm breath sprayed on her neck, instantly causing a series of goosebumps. Not only did she mutter unconsciously, she didn't even notice when someone was standing behind her. As soon as she opened her mouth, the man immediately covered her mouth from behind, fearing that she would make even the slightest sound. He said anxiously, "Don't make any noise. I'm just very hungry and came here to steal a bowl of milk. If you disturb them, not only will you not be able to steal the milk, but we will both be beaten to death." Chin Ruoruo lowered her eyes and saw out of the corner of her eye that the sleeves covering her arms were made of coarse cloth. After hesitating for a moment, he nodded. Slowly turning around, a wolf totem suddenly appeared in front of Chin Ruoruo. She was not mentally prepared for a moment and fell directly onto the snow without standing firmly. The man in front of her was tall, wearing a black leather mask. The wolf she had just seen was in the shape of that mask. In the firelight in the dark night, it looked even more hideous and terrifying. The man's entire face was hidden under the mask, leaving only his eyes visible. He bowed slightly with just the right amount of respectfulness, but it was inexplicably awkward, as if such a person should not be a servant, but his attire and eyes were like those of an inferior. He looked at her steadily through their mask with his dark eyes, and stretched out his hand to help her up from the snow. Just looking at the slight smile in those eyes made Chin Ruoruo suddenly become alert. Since she arrived, everyone has been either sarcastic, cold-eyed, or hostile to her. It's hard for her not to wonder if the people in front of her have some conspiracy to approach her. Maybe Yang Jinyuan was hiding nearby, watching her being fooled. Avoiding the hand in front of her, Chin Ruoruo stood up from the snow by herself. "You? Sure." The man raised his finger, pointed at the figure in the tent, and then pointed in the opposite direction. He motioned for the two of them to change the ground and talk. Chin Ruoruo hesitated for a moment, and the figure in the tent stood up swayingly and was about to walk out. There was nothing she could do but let the man who suddenly appeared pull her and hide behind a rock covered by snow and wind. Quietly observing the situation in the tent. The man on night duty was drunk and staggered out of the tent. He glanced casually into the sheepfold and began to take off his clothes. Chin Ruoruo frowned and hadn't reacted yet when the man's palm came over her again. "Cover her eyes." Everything in front of her was dark. Chin Ruoruo panicked and subconsciously hit the man's chest hard with her intact elbow. I heard a heavy groan from the person behind me, but he still didn't let go. Chin Ruoruo keenly noticed the sound of water accompanied by a fishy smell, and then she realized that the young man on duty had drunk too much and came out to urinate. He immediately bit his lower lip, feeling a little embarrassed. Fortunately, the young man on duty finished his duty quickly and returned to the tent. The hand on her eyes loosened, and Chin Ruoruo's vision gradually recovered. She immediately turned around and saw the man holding his chest and leaning against the stone, looking uncomfortably. Apart from his tightly closed eyes, the only thing you could see was his Adam's apple rolling up and down due to the unbearable pain beneath the corner of his collar. "I'm sorry. Are you okay?" Gasping for air, the man laughed helplessly. "Don't worry, princess. People like us have thick skin and flesh. We can bear this pain and it will pass. Do you know my identity? The princess's appearance is one of the most beautiful in the country, not to mention the grassland." The drooping eyelashes quickly concealed the light in the pupils. "I just didn't expect that the former legitimate princess would steal goat milk. Extraordinary times call for extraordinary measures. Chin Ruoruo was embarrassed for just a moment, then immediately regained her composure. Even the royal city was occupied by others, and her father, the king, and her mother were slaughtered. What kind of princess is she now? Why should she pretend to be noble? He carefully released the little wolf in his arms, and stretched out his little finger to feel the little wolf sucking in small sips. If it wasn't for saving it, I wouldn't have taken the risk. It is a blessing for it to be adopted by a princess. Chin Ruoruo just smiled slightly at such compliments, thinking it was just a courtesy and not taking it seriously. The wolf was originally implicated because of her, causing the separation of mother and child, and now it has no food to eat. What a blessing! Sensing that she was not in high spirits, the masked man pursed his lips and changed the subject. The people in this tent will be completely drunk if they are late for a while. It will be safest to go in and get the milk then. But it is really unfair to the princess to let people like me stay in such a cold place. What grievance! How can a person like you be inferior to others? Chin Ruoruo's brows were cold and she slowly raised her head with a look of disapproval. What high and low, what noble, I used to be a princess, but now I am a prisoner who is worse than a beast. No one knows what fate will be like in the next moment. We must seize our fate at any time and never give up. Chin Ruoruo was talking to herself without noticing the man behind her. A faint smile played across her lips, and a hint of slight nostalgia flashed across her deep eyes, but she quickly regained her composure. Sighing softly, listening to the laughter in the tent not far away, Chin Ruoruo recalled the half-spoken words they had just said, and said quietly, "You just said that Yang Jinyuan risked his life for his mother." Yes. Unexpectedly, Chin Ruoruo would bring the topic back here. The masked man's eyes froze, and he turned his head to stare at the snow prince under his feet. Back then, the third prince's mother was ill and needed herbs, so in order to win the prize of extending her life, he signed up for the beast fight. He won at the cost of having his chest bitten through by the wild wolf king. He said it simply, but Chin Ruoruo already understood the situation. If you want to survive when you are out of favor, you can only risk your life. Princess, do you still think that His Highness is motivated by ambition? Yes. I still think so. Chin Ruoruo spoke without hesitation, with a cold expression on her face. Yang Jinyuan really wanted the medicine, and he really wanted to show off, but he was too smart and was chosen as a hostage. As he said this, he suddenly smiled awkwardly. No wonder when Yang Jinyuan first came to Chin, he always had chest pain and coughed up blood whenever it was cloudy, rainy, or extremely cold. There is such a past. It was just a piercing through the chest. The pain alone could make a person lose all strength and die from the pain. How could a 6-year-old child endure the pain and kill the wolf? Chin Ruoruo just looked at her arm, which was wrapped. For you. A heavy water bag was stuffed into Chin Ruoruo's hand. She looked at the figure squatting down to fill another water bag. There were traces of sewing patches on his sleeves. She felt a little sour inexplicably. Thanks. Just as I was about to say something, I heard a noisy sound not far away, like a group of people approaching from afar, holding torches connected together like a fire dragon. She had been out for some time, and it was a little later than she expected that someone had just come to find her. A man's hoarse voice appeared above her head, and they all looked over there. Princess, you'd better go back soon. If they make them look for you anxiously, your situation will only become more difficult. Chin Ruoruo certainly knew that what he said was true, but she could only lower her head and smile bitterly. Seeing that the fire was getting closer and closer, it seemed that it was about to search here. If these people saw someone helping her, who knows what would happen to the masked man? You should leave now. Chin Ruoruo immediately ran forward a few steps, then suddenly stopped. I haven't asked your name yet. Thank you for today. I will definitely repay you if I have the chance in the future. Repay. While rubbing the bite in her mouth, the lower half of her masked face suddenly curled up the corners of her lips with an inexplicable and somewhat evil smile, as if laughing at her naivety and overestimation of her own abilities. Chin Ruoruo couldn't help but tighten the water bag in her hand. She didn't blame people for laughing at her. Given her current situation, even protecting herself was a problem, let alone repaying someone. But the pride in her bones would not allow her to bow her head and belittle herself. She turned her head away, although reluctantly. She still promised in a low voice, I will repay you, there will be a day. Then I will wait for the princess, and wait for the princess to return the favor. The low and hoarse voice carried a slight smile, without any mockery. Chin Ruoruo stared blankly at the dark eyes under the mask, staring at her intently. She only felt a sense of familiarity, but it passed by and she didn't catch anything. My name is Archo, princess, please remember it. Chin Ruoruo's heart tightened when she heard the crunching sound of snow being stepped on from behind. When she turned around again, the figure had disappeared. She was the only one left in the sheepfold, and was surrounded by the palace servants who had come over to form a circle. Nanny Fang walked out from behind the crowd and walked around the tent and the sheepfold. When she saw her, her eyes were sharp as if she could see through everything. The princess made us look for her so hard, but she actually hid here. What is this? Chin Ruoruo subconsciously hid the water bag behind her, but it was snatched away by someone. Before Nanny Fang could say anything, the man sniffed and scolded her first. Well, a princess like you actually did such a sneaky thing, hiding here to steal goat milk. Do you know that in our Dayan, stealing will result in the chopped off of your hands and feet? Moreover, this is such noble goat milk, are you worthy of stealing it? The people around immediately laughed. She raised her hand, and the guards immediately surrounded her, grabbed Chin Ruoruo's hands and tied them up behind her back. The bandages on her hands broke, and the wounds immediately became numb from the cold in the snow. Chin Ruoruo smiled coldly without any fear and did not beg for mercy. But there was a coldness in his eyes. She had thought about the consequences when she came out, but she didn't expect that the person who came to find her was not Ying Jinyuan. Who are you? A palace maid was yelling at her. Even though she was under someone's control now, not everyone could step on her. He glanced at the aggressive crowd in front of him, his eyes filled with coldness. This arrogant look immediately aroused the dissatisfaction of the woman who was speaking. You will soon know who I am. Come, break her legs for me. Glancing at Chin Ruoruo, Nanny Fang frowned and came over to stop the guard who wanted to take her away. She looked at the palace maid who had just spoken. Luwu, the third prince has already handed Madame Qian Rui over to me for care. No matter what problems arise, they are my own. I have to report them to His Highness before he can make a decision. Third prince. Har har. I was left behind by the crown prince to assist the third prince in managing all matters. Even if the third prince is here, this is a small matter that must be handled according to the rules. Even Chin Ruoruo couldn't help but take a closer look at the woman called Luwu in front of her despite such indifferent mockery. Unlike other palace maids, her palace dress was not only the green color in her name, but also had a circle of rabbit fur at the collar for windproof, which showed that her status was not low. When speaking, he especially criticized the crown prince and his assistant, and it was almost as if his identity as the crown prince's man was written on his face. Chin Ruoruo could not help but frown at this kind of behavior. As if she saw the disdain in her eyes, Luwu slowly walked up to Chin Ruoruo, picked up the water bag, unscrewed the lid and threw it aside. Slowly turning the bottle mouth downwards, pure white goat milk poured out instantly, and soon all poured onto the snow, leaving not even a drop. Then she threw the water bag at Chin Ruoruo's feet in disgust. Luwu took out a handkerchief and clapped her hands. If it was just stealing, it would be fine. What I saw tonight was that the remnants of the Qin state wanted to take advantage of the opportunity to poison. Do you think this is a crime worthy of death, Nanny Fang? Oh. The goat milk that was hard to get was trampled and thrown away. Chin Ruoruo raised her hand and slapped the man directly. No one thought that she would break free from the restraints and attack directly. Everyone was stunned for a moment, with only the crackling sound of burning torches around. Chin Ruoruo did not hold back her strength, and a red slap mark was left firmly on Luwu's cheek. When she realized the burning pain on her face, she rushed forward to fight with Chin Ruoruo. Are you crazy? You still think you are the princess of Qin, how dare you hit me? Chin Ruoruo looked at her madly, nodded and said coldly, don't you understand why I hit you? While moving his wrist, he bent down and picked up the water bag. First, you are talking nonsense and trying to pin a false accusation on me. Second, no matter who you are to the crown prince, from the imperial concubine to Yang Jinyuan, your third prince, personally issued an order to heal my wounds, but you ignored the order and wanted to carry out a private punishment. You don't take the imperial concubine and the prince seriously. You are so disrespectful of etiquette. Wait until the day you become the crown princess to talk about it. Even if you recover from your injuries, you will still be a prostitute in the army. What are you so proud of? Seeing that Luwu was still glaring at her with disdain, Chin Ruoruo nodded and chuckled, yes, but even if I am a military prostitute, I am the woman who has been married to Yang Jinyuan. How do you know that this goat milk is not what he promised me to use when we were making love on my couch? What's more?" Shaking the empty water bag in his hand, Qin Ruoruo's face flashed with an unquestionable majesty. "There is nothing here. Are you catching me stealing or poisoning? What evidence do you have?" Applause broke out from behind the tent. A shadow slowly walked over from behind, and it was obvious that he had been listening for a long time. "It's really wonderful." Chapter 16. Please beg me. Third Prince. The palace maids knelt in a row, leaving only Qin Ruoruo standing there, watching Yang Jinyuan walking towards her step by step in a snow-white banner. She lowered her long eyelashes and was not prepared to move. "Third Prince, this Madame Qian Rui is really abominable. Not only did she steal, but she also dared to provoke and hit me. She should be severely punished." Hearing Luwu pulling Yang Jinyuan to complain, Qin Ruoruo suddenly sneered. Luwu didn't expect her to be so arrogant and was stunned for a moment. "You dare to laugh?" "Of course I laughed. You kept saying that I was stealing and that your goat milk was precious, but so many palace servants saw with their own eyes that you poured out such a precious thing like dirty water. If I should be punished, then what is your blatant waste? You..." Unexpectedly, Qin Ruoruo dared to find fault with her. Luwu only regretted that she had not caught her right away and pulled out her tongue. Yang Jinyuan stared at Qin Ruoruo's face with a smile, and his smile deepened. "Luwu, she even dared to hit me. What do you think she dared not do?" Luwu shut up unwillingly. The news that Qin Ruoruo slapped Yang Jinyuan in front of everyone had already become a big deal, and everyone knew that he could shamelessly say this, but she couldn't continue. Yang Jinyuan brushed off the floating snow on his sleeves without caring. It's already troublesome enough to take care of the daily affairs of so many servants and palace maids brought back from Qin. Miss Luwu doesn't need to worry about a mere Madame Qian Rui. Otherwise, when the crown prince comes back and sees that you are exhausted and haggard, he will definitely blame me. But Luwu clenched her teeth and wanted to say something, but when she met the coldness in Yang Jinyuan's eyes, she immediately shut her mouth. Yang Jinyuan lifted Qin Ruoruo's hand and looked at the wound that had broken open again. He frowned slightly and said, "I'm afraid this injury will take some more time to heal. It's a pity that the soldiers in the barracks are still waiting to have a taste of Madame Qian Rui. I'm afraid they will be disappointed again. It is my fault for not considering this matter carefully. I will take everyone away first." Luwu's face changed. She could use the prince's appointment to save Yang Jinyuan's face, but she had to ignore the needs of these soldiers who had just won a victory. Afraid of saying more and making more mistakes, he hurriedly left with his people. But before leaving, he glared at Qin Ruoruo deeply, secretly remembering today's grudge and waiting for her to fall into his hands in the future. After everyone left, only Yang Jinyuan was left standing in front of Qin Ruoruo. Qin Ruoruo didn't want to pay attention to him and turned to leave. "Stop." Qin Ruoruo didn't even look back and kept walking. "Who is the person who stole goat milk with you?" With just one sentence, she instantly stood there, unable to take another step. His expression changed several times, and he turned around and said coldly and steadily, "I don't know what you are talking about." She had just noticed that the footprints on the snow had been trampled by the palace servants and it was impossible to tell whose footprints they were. Yang Jinyuan had no way of knowing. "This water bag, and the footprints of one large and one small in the sheepfold. Ruoruo, I really underestimated you. It only takes an hour to seduce my people to willingly steal milk for you." Qin Ruoruo moved her lips but did not explain. Although her whereabouts and attire were a bit strange, the man named Ashu did help her, so she simply kept silent to avoid being found out by Yang Jinyuan. Seeing her silence, a strange look flashed in Yang Jinyuan's eyes. If Emperor Qin were still alive, I wonder what his expression would be when he saw that you had even learned how to steal. "You are not allowed to utter my father's name." The calmness just now was broken in an instant. Qin Ruoruo turned around abruptly and looked at the man in front of her who she had admired for many years, with only resentment that was about to burst out of her eyes. "How dare you say their names again?" During the days of coma, she recalled many things from the past in her dreams, but no matter what they were, the father in her memory was a benevolent king. Even when facing Yang Jinyuan, their hostage thrown to her by others, he treated him like a prince who was his in-law and gave him enough face. She wished she had remembered it wrongly, and that their Daqin had really let the man in front of her down, then everything would have a reason, but the reality was that Daqin was so innocent. defeated by these sinister people. But she felt too unwilling to do so, and she didn't want to waste any more time questioning the man in front of her. Seeing her clench her teeth, Yang Jinyuan suddenly laughed, revealing an inexplicable emotion. Okay, let's talk about the little wolf cub in your arms. If you want goat milk, you can come to me. Why do you have to steal it in such a cold day? You know I won't refuse your request. The hair hanging by her side was pulled by Yang Jinyuan. Judging from his words, if someone didn't know the truth, they would probably think that the two were a couple. The word ruoruo in his words sounded like flowing spring water, whispering with lingering affection, but it only made the hatred and disgust in Qin Ruoruo's eyes deeper. If I beg you, will you give it to me? That depends on how you ask. His voice lowered a few notes. Yang Jinyuan reached out and stroked her neck. His delicate and warm wrist was like the finest jade in the world, making people unable to let go. He slowly bent down and pressed his lips against her neck. The man's deep and hot breath became hotter and hotter. Even though she was a virgin, she knew what the strange fire in Yang Jinyuan's eyes meant. The tingling sensation became stronger and stronger. Qin Ruoruo clenched her fists. Yang Jinyuan, you really make me sick. The action paused. Yang Jinyuan raised his eyebrows, looked up and carefully took in the fear and anger in her eyes, shattering the fragments of light in her eyes. He chuckled softly. Ruoruo, don't forget that I just saved you, otherwise your leg would have been lost. He pressed his hand on her wound, and the piercing pain almost made her fall. It seemed that this kind of pain was necessary to remind her of the danger she had just experienced. Qin Ruoruo closed her eyes, gritted her teeth and endured the pain which gradually dissipated. His throat was already stained with the smell of blood, and he revealed the truth in a cold tone. You saved me just to establish your own authority. Even though she was now forced to assume a status worse than that of a slave, everyone knew that the person entangled with her was Yang Jinyuan. If she was allowed to be punished by a palace maid left behind by the prince, Yang Jinyuan would never be able to establish his authority again. Qin Ruoruo opened her eyes and broke free from his embrace without hesitation, stepping back to distance herself from him. Don't even mention that I was saved by you just now. If Yang Jinyuan knew that he would end up like this after being saved by you, he would have died directly to be clean. Oh. Yang Jinyuan held his forehead and smiled softly. Ruoruo, you have grown up. Before Qin Ruoruo could react, she suddenly felt her waist tighten. Yang Jinyuan actually carried her on his shoulders and strode towards the tent. The soldiers on duty along the way looked at them with playful eyes and burst into excited applause. In their eyes, Qin Ruoruo was just the prey hunted by Yang Jinyuan, no different from the livestock he hunted on weekdays. As the most precious princess of the Qin dynasty, she was played around by their masters and was nothing more than a lamb to be slaughtered. The cheers and applause along their way were praise for Yang Jinyuan's abilities, but to her it was the ultimate humiliation. Once inside the tent, the noise that had surrounded them immediately dissipated. Qin Ruoruo was thrown on the couch, and before she could react, Yang Jinyuan's hand had already touched her ankle. Chapter 17, The Struggle Between Beds. The slightly cool touch immediately caused a layer of fine bumps to appear on Qin Ruoruo's body. Yang Jinyuan, my injury hasn't healed yet, you can't. What can't I do? Yang Jinyuan stretched out a hand. His eyes narrowed slightly as he observed Qin Ruoruo's expression beneath him. It's unbearable, Ruoruo. There are tens of thousands of officers and soldiers. How can you accept their kindness and make them happy? You really make me sick. Qin Ruoruo wanted to stand up, but was easily pushed back onto the couch by Yang Jinyuan. Unable to struggle any longer, he simply closed his eyes and stopped looking at the person in front of him. Hey, at worst, I'll just think of it as being bitten by a dog again. Yang Jinyuan's cold eyes trembled slightly, and he immediately felt a piercing pain from where his fingers were being pulled hard by him. Cold sweat immediately dripped from her forehead. Qin Ruoruo slowly opened her eyes, hatred surging wildly in her eyes. She clenched her teeth and sneered, but refused to change her words and beg for mercy. Think about it, there seems to be little difference between being bitten by a dog and being bitten by a group of dogs. Because they are all beasts. As soon as he finished speaking, he felt a sudden pressure on his neck. Yang Jinyuan pinched her jaw with 2 fingers and pressed his index finger against her lips with some force, causing her to rub her eyes with tears in pain. Ruoruo, you really look like a legitimate princess of the Qin dynasty, but you are too stupid. There are many people in this barracks who want to kill you. Only by relying on me can you survive. From the beginning to the end, it was you who gave me all these injuries, killed my relatives, and humiliated me in every way, wasn't it you? Qin Ruoruo gritted her teeth and stared at Yang Jinyuan's profile hidden in the darkness in the candlelight. Her hands clenched into fists involuntarily, and the surging anger in her heart almost burned her. What are you talking about dependence now, Yang Jinyuan? Is this another new way you have come up with to humiliate me? Yang Jinyuan just stared at her deeply for a long time without answering. But the more indifferent she looked, the more anger and resentment Qin Ruoruo felt in her heart surge, as if she had never taken what she said to heart. This indifference was the greatest humiliation. It is the greatest disrespect to her dead relatives, friends, and subordinates. Qin Ruoruo suddenly opened her mouth and bit his arm, almost like a hungry hunting dog that was determined to tear off a piece of meat. Because she had used so much strength, her mouth was soon filled with a strong smell of blood, which made her stomach churn and she wanted to vomit, but she was unwilling to let go and still held on tightly. Yang Jinyuan acted as if it didn't hurt. He just frowned and looked at her quietly. He didn't dodge or try to break free, as if it didn't hurt at all. The more he did this, the more uncertain Qin Ruoruo felt. If the blood in her mouth wasn't real, she would almost think that he didn't bite hard enough. Just as he wanted to see clearly, Yang Jinyuan suddenly lowered his body even lower. His long black hair fell down his shoulders. His dark eyes were hidden in the darkness under the candlelight, and his expression could not be seen clearly. Third Prince, the things you requested have been delivered. A shadow standing outside the door suddenly spoke, startling Qin Ruoruo so much that she trembled and couldn't react yet. With a hissing sound, the hem of her skirt was torn, her thighs felt cold, and her entire snow-white skin was exposed to the air. The hand that had been placed on her ankle slowly moved up and gripped it more tightly. Qin Ruoruo's eyes were shocked. Seeing Yang Jinyuan's silence, the people outside took it as a consent and immediately lifted the curtain. A palace servant came in with her head lowered, carrying a tray. As soon as she came in, her eyes subconsciously stared at Qin Ruoruo, who was lying on the couch. Let out an exclamation. I am guilty of disturbing your highness's pleasure. The palace maid looked at him as if she had seen something extraordinary. Her face instantly turned red to her neck in panic and she lowered her head, not daring to look at him again. Roll. Yang Jinyuan spoke lightly, and the palace maid trembled all over, bit her lower lip tightly, and retreated. Yang Jinyuan randomly pressed some acupoints on Qin Ruoruo's face, and her teeth felt sore and she was forced to open her mouth. When he raised his hand, his entire palm was covered in blood. Yang Jinyuan stared at it quietly for a few seconds as if admiring it, then he shook the wound casually and put his hand back into his sleeve. Ruoruo, do you know why she not only didn't notice that you were committing a crime and hurting me, but instead blushed and ran away? Qin Ruoruo really didn't know, but her heartbeat quickened a little, as if she had inadvertently understood some charming thoughts, but she couldn't figure it out, and she didn't bother to answer Yang Jinyuan's words. She said nothing and Yang Jinyuan didn't care. With one hand holding her ankle, he placed the fingertips of the other hand on her arm and gently stroked it. His blood-stained hand soon drew a bright red flower on her skin. A tingling sensation gradually grew. From an outsider's perspective, I was on top of you, and I was holding your ankles tightly, playing with them. It looked like a romantic scene between a man and a woman. She thought she had caught us having sex, so she was naturally embarrassed. Nausea. Qin Ruoruo's cheeks suddenly flushed, and her heart was filled with humiliation and shame at these words. Seemingly satisfied with the pattern he had drawn, Yang Jinyuan raised his hand and put his fingertips in his mouth, licking away the blood left on them. He soon frowned and said, "It's so bitter." Ruoruo, didn't you feel bitter when you bit it just now? You know, human blood is the bitterest and dirtiest thing in the world. He said he was talking to Qin Ruoruo, but the dazed look in his eyes made it more like he was talking to himself. The blood on the corners of his lips made his red lips drip with blood, making him look particularly charming under the candlelight. Such actions made Qin Ruoruo even more confused about his intentions, but she did not dare to relax at all. Ever since the tragic wedding day, she felt that Yang Jinyuan was becoming more and more of a stranger. There was not a trace of his former self in him. She even thought that the gentle and humble Yang Jinyuan who accompanied her in Qin state was actually pretended to be another person from head to toe. The Yang Jinyuan in front of him, who is paranoid and dangerous, is the real third prince of Yang state. He is the one who can become famous by fighting with the Snow Wolf King at the age of 6. He turned around and released his restraints on her. Qin Ruoruo took the opportunity to crawl to the other side of the bed and stared at Yang Jinyuan warily, not daring to relax for a moment. Yang Jinyuan casually picked up a pink and white object from under the couch. Qin Ruoruo's eyes trembled, and she subconsciously touched her chest, only to find that Yang Jinyuan had loosened her collar before throwing her on the bed, and threw the snow wolf cub hiding there off the bed. When it was picked up, it seemed to feel the danger between life and death, and the snow wolf cub screamed instinctively. Qin Ruoruo's heart was broken when she heard it, but she didn't dare to step forward to snatch it easily. The two slender fingers holding its body could easily strangle it to death if one were to apply a little strength. It's such a stupid thing, but it's worth your risk to steal it. As he spoke, he picked up the dishes from the tray beside him and placed them in front of the wolf cub. Qin Ruoruo then realized that what the palace servant had just brought over was a bowl of fresh goat's milk. As if smelling the food at this time, the snow wolf instinctively put its nose close to rub Yang Jinyuan's fingertips. "What do you want?" Qin Ruoruo had not forgotten what Yang Jinyuan had said, asking her to beg him. Chapter 18, Failed Assassination. "Ruoruo, what do you think I want?" Yang Jinyuan's chest shook with laughter, and the dark patterns on his robe flickered in the candlelight like a ferocious beast waiting to attack at any time in the night, dangerous and mysterious. "What can you give me now? Your body, freedom, even your life and death are all in my hands. What do you think I want?" Qin Ruoruo remained silent. Even though these words were extremely humiliating, they were indeed her embarrassing situation at the moment. "But there is one thing you can do." Hearing him let go, Qin Ruoruo couldn't help but look up at the broken light in Yang Jinyuan's eyes. Her chin hurt and was forced to be pulled closer to Yang Jinyuan's lips. "Let me feel comfortable, as you said and did when I was a hostage under your father's hands, remember?" Qin Ruoruo trembled all over. How could she not remember? At that time, she was saved by Yang Jinyuan, and she would sneak into their hostage palace from time to bring some food and daily necessities. Yang Jinyuan once asked her why she always came to see him. The answer she gave was what made her feel at ease. She didn't lie. Just watching him from afar, even if she did nothing, she would be like a happy little bird, skipping happily back to her palace. At that time, the girl's heartbeat seemed so beautiful to her, but it became a humiliation that Yang Jinyuan took revenge on. Blood welled up between lips and throat. All right. This sound was good too, it brought with it endless melancholy, and the room suddenly became quiet. Yang Jinyuan's fingers trembled, and the fingers that were pinching the snow wolf loosened. The pink bowl immediately stumbled towards the bowl of milk and started licking it in big gulps. Staring at the little wolf's greedy approach, Qin Ruoruo felt a little relieved, at least her life was saved. But then she felt her waist tighten, and Yang Jinyuan raised his hand and threw her onto the bed. Bullying approach. Qin Ruoruo's heartbeat did not stop. The tearing pain that night made her feel a strong fear. She screamed and struggled almost out of tune. "Yang Jinyuan, my body is not healed yet, I can't. Oh, what can I do?" The hot breath stopped right behind her ear, like a feather torturing her back and forth. Qin Ruoruo closed her eyes tightly and bit her lower lip, waiting for the coming storm, but she didn't take the next step for a long time. She moved her body hesitantly, and the grip on her waist immediately tightened a bit, almost strangling her coldly. "If you move again, I will eat you directly." The burning temperature on the waist, which was so hot that it could burn people even through their clothes, made Qin Ruoruo annoyed and unwilling, but she really didn't dare to move again. Her whole body was stiff and she stood straight, listening to the snow wolf licking her milk and the occasional popping of candlelight. Finally, she couldn't hold on any longer and fell asleep with heavy eyelids. When she woke up, the weight on her waist reminded Qin Ruoruo that the person behind her had not left yet. Turning around, Yang Jinyuan was lying there with his shirt loose, partially exposing his chest, revealing his well-trained chest muscles. With his eyes closed, he no longer looked as fierce as usual, and looked as pure and clear as the boy he once was. Yang Jinyuan embraced her in this extremely intimate, doting, and possessive manner, and they slept peacefully all night. If the country had not been destroyed, if there had not been so many conspiracies, and if everything was just a nightmare, then this scene should have been the most common scene every morning after her and Yang Jinyuan's wedding. Holding hands, dressing in front of the mirror, they lived in harmony and happiness just as the emperor and the empress had wished before her marriage. Chin Ruoruo slowly closed her eyes and pulled out the hairpin from her hair. It was just a polished branch. She tightened her palms and raised them suddenly, but when she was determined to put them down, the man on the couch suddenly opened his eyes and stared at her movements quietly with amusement in his eyes. Chin Ruoruo gritted his teeth and kept his movements, but his hand was easily twisted an inch away from his chest, and his palm was sore. The branch fell on the couch without making any sound. Yang Jinyuan half sat up and leaned against the pillow, his hair scattered on his exposed chest, showing a wild beauty. His slender fingers played with the thin stick, and he couldn't help but sneered helplessly, "Killing me with such a small stick is too childish. If I were you, I would be ready at any time and polish everything around me that could be used as a weapon to the best condition, so that I can realize my dream of revenge." TSK. Yang Jinyuan frowned and saw that it was a small thorn on the branch that pricked his hand. He raised his hand and swung the branch straight into the pillar in the tent. Penetrating. With such skills, even if Yang Jinyuan was really asleep just now, it would be difficult for her to kill him with one blow. Before he could react, his hand was suddenly pulled and Yang Jinyuan held it in his palm and forcefully pinched it open. The originally fair hands were densely covered with small black thorns from the branches. Chin Ruoruo withdrew her hand calmly, lowered her eyes, and pinched a thorn from her finger. Immediately, a round bead of blood oozed out. "I remember that you used to feel pain when a thorn pricked you, and all the people in the palace came to comfort you." Her body trembled slightly, but she pulled out all the thorns without changing her expression. "I used to be a princess. My family and country were there. I had someone to rely on and an embrace to act like a spoiled child. Now, she has no one to rely on and no home to return to." Yang Jinyuan's expression flickered slightly, and then he stood up indifferently. Nanifang came in from outside the room, brought the prepared hot water, and stood aside. Chin Ruoruo watched Yang Jinyuan wash up quickly, change into a dark-colored suit, and sit aside. He looked at her through the bronze mirror and said, "Ruoruo, come and help me put on the hair crown." Chin Ruoruo didn't move. The little snow wolf next to him woke up and stumbled out, bumping into Yang Jinyuan's shoes. Perhaps it smelled the scent of the person who fed it last night, so it just sniffed and then started babbling for food. The playful eyes contained endless sarcasm. Chin Ruoruo gritted her teeth, stood up, walked behind him, picked up a comb and helped him comb his hair. However, one of his hands was injured and he didn't know how to make Yenren's hair accessories. After trying for a long time, he still couldn't successfully put his hair into a bun. He could only braid a loose pigtail and then put it on the top of his head. Such a crude hairstyle did not obstruct Yang Jinyuan's handsomeness at all. Instead, he looked more wild than a leopard in the snow. Nanifang brought another tray with various foods on it, including a dish of goat milk. She turned around and looked at Yang Jinyuan's hair crown with a complicated expression. She glanced at Chin Ruoruo as if she wanted to say something, but she still kept her mouth shut and stood aside. It was much richer than what she had eaten in recent days. It was obvious that the person who prepared the food knew that Yang Jinyuan was staying at her place, and prepared it according to his taste. Yang Jinyuan turned around, opened the tent and strode forward. His powerful voice attracted the curiosity of the people around him, who all laughed and joked. "Madam Fang, take good care of her. Find a few military prostitutes to teach Madam Chinrue well, so that she can prepare to receive the favor of the 1,000 people as soon as possible." Chapter 19 Reward. Yang Jinyuan really did what he said. As they finished talking, the breakfast plates were just being taken away when several beautiful women walked in side by side from outside. Each of them has his or her own unique temperament and appearance. They seem to be women from different clans. Just by standing there, they have the ability to make a man's bones go soft. In an instant, Chin Ruoruo's nose was filled with the fragrance of cosmetics. "Madam Fang, is this the princess from the Warring States period who was given the name Madam Chinrue? She doesn't look that good." The woman in green was only wearing a tube top dance dress in this winter day. She was wearing a fox fur coat when she came. It was obvious that she was the most senior among these women. But the look of contempt was too obvious, making Chin Ruoruo extremely uncomfortable. He turned his head away coldly. "I don't need you to teach me. It would be better for her to die now than to let her become a mere presence for the entertainment of thousands or tens of thousands of soldiers in the army, rather than tarnish the name of the Qin state." Seeing her like this, the woman was not surprised. She waved her hand to let Nanifang and the others go out, then slowly walked to Chin Ruoruo, circled around her, and then moved closer to her. She smiled softly with her red lips curled up faintly. Even if you don't learn, you will still be Madame Qianrui. After your injury is healed, none of those men who are ready to make a move will let you go. Qin Ruoruo's heart suddenly lifted up, and she couldn't help but think of the miserable cry of her maidservant who came with her as a dowry that day. She closed her eyes in pity, her face as pale as a wall. At most, I scratched my face. Or death. Har. The woman raised her tone and sneered at Qin Ruoruo's naivety. Find out the situation. Your past identity is worthless now. If you can't even keep your skin, it's time for you to die. Oh no, maybe you won't even die. You look down on us for serving others with our beauty, but your past identity will only lead to a more tragic end than us. Each of us was either sold or enslaved. None of us is willing to be a prostitute, but we recognize our own fate, and you haven't yet. Qin Ruoruo didn't know if it was an illusion, but she saw a flash of pain in her eyes. It doesn't matter what happened between you and the third prince before. I can only tell you that in a month, when your wounds are healed, you will reappear in public and compete for your virginity as Madame Qianrui. It will be very important to decide who in the army will spend your first night with you. It will be very important whether you can capture his heart. Otherwise, you will be kicked out from one tent and transferred to another, and then passed down from one tent to another. The people you come into contact with will become lower and lower, starting with generals, then remnants of soldiers, slaves washing horses in the stables, and even castrated eunuchs. Their methods will only cruelly vent their physical imperfections on you. What could be more pleasurable than beating a drowned dog? You know, a phoenix in distress is no better than a chicken. Qin Ruoruo's heart suddenly tightened. Before she could react, the woman sneered and lifted the curtain and walked out. I could still faintly hear her voice talking to Nanny Fang. Madam Fang, let's stop here today. Wait until everyone has gone far away. Nanny Fang just entered the tent and saw Qin Ruoruo teasing the snow wolf, but didn't say anything. He just brought over a wooden barrel, which was filled with the clothes she had taken off in the past few days. And there is also the dance dress she wore at the Colosseum that day. Wash your clothes yourself. If you don't wash them, you won't have anything to wear. Qin Ruoruo was silent. After a long time, Nanny Fang heard the sound of the door curtain. She turned around and saw that the place where Qin Ruoruo had sat was empty, even the wooden barrel was gone. Perhaps because of Yang Jinyuan's order, the patrolmen passing by were not surprised to see her. Qin Ruoruo avoided people and walked to the lake. When the palace maids who were fetching water nearby saw her, they all moved away from her. Oh, in this day and age you can still see princesses washing their own clothes like the rest of us. What princess? Look carefully, she is just a cheap whore from the enemy country. She is worse than you and me, and she has no dignity to live like this. Someone said yesterday that the third prince couldn't forget her and even stayed at her place. She had to wash her clothes with one hand and wait on men at night. I think it's a lowly fate. People were pointing and talking in groups of 2 or 3, but Qin Ruoruo pretended not to hear. She lifted the bucket and filled it with water. But the bucket was heavy to begin with, and it became even heavier after it was filled with water, and she almost fell into the water. She barely managed to pour the water back. Holding the empty bucket, he looked up and looked around. Sure enough, the people around him all had a sneering look on their faces. They even deliberately took their own water-scooping utensils and poured a few handfuls of water at Qin Ruoruo's feet. Qin Ruoruo frowned, thought for a moment, and took out the water bag from last night from her arms. As long as you fill the water bag with water from the lake first and then pour it into the bucket, it will be no different from a ladle. Thinking of the masked man named Deshu, the coldness in Qin Ruoruo's eyes softened a little. It seemed that he had helped her once again invisibly. The water was freezing cold. She shivered all over when she just touched the water with a few fingers. If she hadn't been taking medicine that day, she would have fallen in and frozen to death. Fortunately, the water bag was quite big and it was half filled in no time. Since her hands were inconvenient, Qin Ruoruo simply took off her shoes and socks and stepped on the clothes in the bucket. The soft clothes were under her feet, and the rich bubbles squeezed out of the soap nuts wrapped around her feet, giving her an itchy touch. Qin Ruoruo didn't feel cold anymore as she stepped on and on. Instead she vented all the depressed emotions of the past few days on the basin of clothes. Seeing that there was nothing fun to watch, the palace servants around simply left. Chin Ruoruo was having a great time. But suddenly his expression froze, the smile on his lips faded, and he stood there unable to move. This method of washing clothes was learned from Yang Jinyuan. At that time, she would go to Yang Jinyuan's residence every now and then to play with him. One time, she couldn't find him after searching everywhere. She saw him treading clothes barefoot by the well in the backyard. Chin Ruoruo found it fun, so she took off her shoes and socks and stepped on clothes with him in a bucket. Finally, we were so tired that we just lay down in the basin and looked up at the clouds in the sky. There was crystal sweat on the tips of their noses and foreheads. But they are all very happy. Now that he thought about it, Yang Jinyuan was probably performing that smile for her. Wash the clothes quickly. Chin Ruoruo carried the bucket and walked towards her tent. When passing by the parade ground, he suddenly remembered something, changed direction and slipped in quietly. If she remembered correctly, this was where the heads of her father and mother were dug out that day. When she woke up these few days ago, she wanted to find out where her parents' bodies were placed. She didn't believe that Yang Jinyuan would bury them in peace. It is even more unacceptable to leave their bodies exposed in the wilderness. As soon as he approached, he saw Yang Jinyuan walking out of the largest conference tent, and a man dressed as a eunuch in an elegant robe dismounted in front of him. Yang Jinyuan saw that person kneeling down to salute, and the people around him also knelt down. The eunuch took out the imperial edict from behind his back, and his shrill voice cut through the snow in the sky and was heard everywhere. My son Jinyuan made great contributions in destroying Qin, so he is specially named the third king. Chapter 20 Falling into an ice cave. Although the reward. But apart from the imperial edict, there was no other reward. He didn't even mention the title. Such a reward is more of a humiliation than a divine grace. After the prince read out the reward, he fell into a long silence. Yang Jinyuan moved, stepped forward to take the imperial edict, and said in a low and respectful voice, "Thank you, father." Chin Ruoruo watched Yang Jinyuan turn around and stand on the stage holding the imperial edict. The audience fell silent after he called out the third prince. He turned around, stood behind a stone for a while, and left quietly. Several days passed. Staring at the stinky meat soup and the dry naan bread in front of him that had been left out for who knows how many days, Chin Ruoruo picked up the naan with an expressionless face, pinched it with her hands and reluctantly ate a few bites. Perhaps it was because he had more affairs to deal with after being crowned king. Yang Jinyuan had not appeared in front of her in the past few days, as if he had forgotten about her. So gradually, voices began to spread outside, saying that she was abandoned by Yang Jinyuan. She was naturally happy to have some peace and quiet, but a lot of trouble followed. The fact that the food being delivered was getting worse day by day said it all. Fortunately, perhaps because of Yang Jinyuan's instructions, no matter what she ate, she never stopped having a bowl of goat's milk every day, and Snow Wolf's life was saved. The door curtain was lifted and Nanny Fang walked in. A bone-chilling wind made Chin Ruoruo shiver all over. The charcoal fire in the house was extinguished early. It was barely bearable during the day, but at midnight, even the tent was frozen. Chin Ruoruo could only curl up and pile everything she could use and cover herself on to barely fall asleep. The prostitute scene that day never appeared again, but someone would come every day to ask her if she had made up her mind. Chin Ruoruo remained silent every day. Fortunately, although it was cold teaching, no one was forcing her to study. I went to do the laundry. As he walked to the door with the bucket in his hand, the person behind him who had not spoken for many days suddenly spoke. Nanny Fang coughed a few times and said, "The spring is getting thicker. Be careful of the ice holes under your feet. If you fall in, you will die." The voice was lukewarm and he didn't even look at her after he finished speaking. Chin Ruoruo pinched the wall of the bucket. He hummed in a muffled voice. But the pace of walking out was a little lighter. In fact, she didn't have so many clothes that needed to be washed, but Nanny Fang had helped her get a few small jobs of washing clothes in the past few days. As long as she finished washing this bucket of clothes today, she could get a small basin of charcoal in exchange. At least she wouldn't have to worry about freezing to death when she went to bed. Just as he put down the bucket, something fell into the lake with a splash, splashing the water several feet high and soaking Chin Ruoruo's head. Wiping her hands from her eyes, Chin Ruoruo looked around, and when she looked up she saw the maid who had been sarcastic to her in the past few days standing on a high place, staring at her with ill intent, with a few huge ice balls in her hands. Seeing her look up, another one fell right in front of her. The lake water splashed again, and this time she was soaked from head to toe. The cold air seemed to be a needle with eyes that kept drilling into her skin through her pores. She was shivering from the cold. Hey, come and take a look. She acts so high and mighty every day. I thought the prince still cared about her, but I didn't expect that she would be abandoned so quickly. I heard that the food she was given these days was worse than slop. If you ask me, why does she need to recover from her wounds? I heard that there are prostitutes in the witch tribe who cut off their hands and feet for fun. I feel so happy when I think about watching her being trampled on and the princess turned into mud. Chin Ruoruo heard ridicule and curses every day and had long been numb to them. She didn't understand at first. She didn't understand why these people, who had nothing in common with her, were so malicious towards her. Later, she understood that these people were originally the lowest-ranking slaves of Yang State, who had been raised since childhood and had been looked down upon and ridiculed. Now, there was a prisoner like her who was even worse than the slaves of Yang State, but she still had the same status and position as before. It became an outlet for these people to vent their past dissatisfaction. Thinking of this, Chin Ruoruo sighed with a helpless smile. Pick up the barrel and walk back. I'm afraid I can't do the laundry today. Unexpectedly, seeing her smile stimulated the little maid on the top and she was immediately dissatisfied. She quickly rushed over to block Chin Ruoruo and growled angrily. Stop. Seeing Chin Ruoruo staring at him expressionlessly, he felt guilty. However, the people around him immediately became ferocious when they saw this. However, facing Chin Ruoruo's face up close, he felt dizzy. The humiliating words just now turned into a dry sentence. What are you laughing at? What's so great about you that you look down on us? Your own people wish you were dead. You have no family, no friends. If I were you, I would have committed suicide long ago and would not be able to face the world. I originally thought that I would see Chin Ruoruo collapse. I didn't expect that the person in front of me still looked so indifferent. The little maid was immediately confused. Why aren't you angry? Are you thinking of something evil? You are right, why am I angry? The hair on her head that had just been touched by water had begun to freeze. Chin Ruoruo put down the bucket and struggled to gather her hair together with her hands. This movement brings out all kinds of charm like flowers blooming. The little maid was dazzled and couldn't help but exclaim as she stared at Chin Ruoruo's appearance. But then, his eyes fell on a green figure that appeared behind her. He suddenly shuddered and continued through gritted teeth, seeing you look so relaxed, I guess you forgot that your parents' heads are still rotting in the beast fighting ground. I forgot to tell you that when spring comes and the ice melts, maybe you can see them eating them when the beasts revive. What did you say? Chin Ruoruo's expression suddenly changed. She had secretly looked for it several times in the past few days, but she never found the remains of her parents at the original location. It was as if that day was just a crazy hallucination and nightmare. She suspected that she had been transferred to another place, but she couldn't think of anyone other than Yang Jinyuan who would order such a thing. And she hadn't seen Yang Jinyuan for a long time. Chin Ruoruo took 2 steps forward, tightly grasped the little girl's hand, and pleaded, are they really buried in the Colosseum? Please tell me. You. The little maid was frightened by her and subconsciously pushed Chin Ruoruo. Suddenly the ice cracked, and an ice hole appeared under Chin Ruoruo's feet, with her ankle stuck in it. Chin Ruoruo's heart tightened and she stretched out her hand to grab something, but the ice, which had always been solid, suddenly cracked into several pieces and trapped her in it. With a thud, she fell into the water. The rushing water under the ice immediately rushed up to her nostrils, sweeping her into the darkness. At first she could still struggle in the water, but soon her hands and feet cramped due to the cold and she no longer had the strength to swim. Her chest was thumping and the feeling of suffocation made her temples almost explode. If she died here, she would soon be frozen together with the ice, and it would be difficult to find her body. Chin Ruoruo felt a sense of sadness in her heart, and the first person she thought of was Yang Jinyuan. I wonder if he would go crazy if he knew of her death and no longer had anyone to vent his humiliation on. Suddenly a dark shadow approached and grabbed her. A warm current surged into her body, pulling Chin Ruoruo towards the water. Chapter 21 Who do you think I am? A warm feeling came down from the corner of her lips, and soon Chin Ruoruo felt that the part of her chest that had been suffocating her suddenly became smooth. She subconsciously leaned to one side and spat out several mouthfuls of water. My vision gradually returned and I could see the back of the tall man in front of me. I was suddenly shocked. You? Her voice was as low and hoarse as a broken drum, but it made the man stop what he was doing. He turned his head and revealed a hideous wolf head mask on his face. Acho, why is it you? If it's not me, who does the princess think it is? The black pupils under the mask glanced at her and then continued to work on the task at hand. As his hands moved, he broke the firewood that he had brought from somewhere and took out a tinderbox from his arms, and soon a fire was made. Instantly, a warm feeling enveloped Chin Ruoruo, driving away the chill in her body. She subconsciously let out a comfortable breath, and then she realized that they were hiding in an ice cave. Not far away, she could hear the sound of flowing water, which must be the culvert where she fell. His outer garment was loosely undone, revealing his soaked inner garment. I guess this is why I was able to breathe just now. Chin Ruoruo was very calm. After putting her clothes in place, she coughed lightly and turned back. She looked solemnly at the man in front of her who was still dripping with water, and bowed deeply. Thank you for saving my life. Forget about the verbal thanks. I like practical things. I just don't know what kind of thank you the princess is going to give me. After Archo finished speaking, he looked Chin Ruoruo up and down. Compared with the lustful and malicious eyes of the men in the military camp, Archo's gaze was meaningless, as if he was just looking at what she could do to repay her. But the more he did this, the more embarrassed Chin Ruoruo became, and she shut her mouth. Now she has to earn enough to eat every day by doing laundry and doing rough labor. I really don't know what to give as a thank you gift. Ashu didn't seem to intend to embarrass her and sat on a rock nearby. Even though Chin Ruoruo couldn't see his expression, she could feel his exhaustion from the inside out. Although he was wearing the most common grey robe worn by slaves, it still couldn't hide the man's tall stature. At first glance, such a man didn't look like a slave at all. Chin Ruoruo forgot to avoid suspicion for a moment. Her eyes fell on Archo, and she carefully looked at the man who saved her life again when they met for the second time. She always felt some inexplicable emotions in her heart. Suddenly the mask turned around, and the pair of dark eyes looked at her with a hint of amusement. Why, princess, could it be that you are attracted to me and can't think of anything to thank me for, so you want to marry me? Chin Ruoruo turned her head quickly, feeling a little embarrassed, but Archo didn't intend to let her go this time. He walked closer step by step. His steps were not as orderly as those of the princes and nobles she usually saw, nor as cautious as the servants and palace maids. His steps were casual yet methodical. In a blink of an eye, he had walked in front of Chin Ruoruo. The two were only a fist's distance apart. Chin Ruoruo then noticed that the man's mask was made of a special piece of black leather. His wet clothes were slightly steaming from the heat of the fire, and a fresh scent of soapberry wafted into her nose. My chin was suddenly pinched. Archo lowered her voice seductively and chuckled. Could it be that I really told you what was in your mind? The princess was so moved that she wanted to marry me? It's a pity that I am so worthless that I can't afford to marry a princess like you, but I can still give it a try for a casual relationship. Chin Ruoruo's heart suddenly tightened. There were only her and Archo here. If this man really wanted to do something to her, she would have no way to escape. But then he felt relieved again, because Archo's eyes were too calm, which was not the look of a lustful person. After staring at the eyes under the mask for a long time, Chin Ruoruo suddenly stretched out her hands and hugged Archo's neck. One hand gently rested on his chest and circled it again and again. Of course I know that I can't get married with my identity. If you really want me, take me. My body is not clean to begin with, I am willing to give it to you. The man's chest tensed up in an instant, and almost immediately Archo stood up and threw her to the ground, turning around quickly, his body trembling slightly. You. This sudden change made Chin Ruoruo stunned. Although she was in so much pain that tears were about to come out, she still stared at the back without blinking. When Archo turned around again, he had regained his composure and was sitting on the other side of the fire. Chin Ruoruo didn't know if it was an illusion, but she felt that he was much colder towards her. Chin Ruoruo didn't intend to let him go. She had a guess in her mind that was about to come out, and she said immediately, "Why? What about me? Do you dislike me, or am I not beautiful enough? Or, are you not good enough?" But this time, no matter how Chin Ruoruo tried to provoke him, there was no ripple in Archo's emotions. He just poked the fire in front of him with a stick. After a long time, he spoke calmly, "Princess, why do you have to belittle yourself? If you want to test me or verify something, just speak up. If the princess is such a lowly person, I don't need to save her, and I won't pay attention to her. Princess, are you trying to ask me why I happened to approach you and why I saved you by such a coincidence? Yes. The fake smile on Chin Ruoruo's face faded, and she began to loosen her hair, shaking her hands in an attempt to work faster. With her identity, there would only be two types of people who would approach her at this time. One type, like Yang Jinyuan, would approach her for revenge, teasing and humiliation, and the other would approach her for lust. Others have already avoided it. She didn't believe that the appearance of the person in front of her was an accident. Their continuous help is kind. You guessed right. I helped you save you just to make a good impression on you, princess. I saw the value in you, princess. My worth? Chin Ruoruo repeated in a murmur. The firelight reflected Archo's mask like a black hole that swallowed people. Her originally calm eyes revealed calculation and cunning without any concealment. Yes, the identity of a princess is of great use to me, and only you can help me change my fate. Suddenly he lifted up his sleeve to reveal a tiny brand on his hand. Chin Ruoruo's eyes trembled slightly. She may not understand the other things, but she does know this mark, which is the mark that only human slaves will have. Once stamped, both the person and their children will be doomed to be slaves for generations to come. The man in front of him was not even an ordinary servant, but the lowest kind of human slave. Although ordinary slaves had a low status, they could be promoted by real estate, and their children could be freed from the status of slaves. However, human slaves were treated like animals from generation to generation, and even their bodies could only be left exposed in the wilderness after death. Compared to Chin Ruoruo's shock, Archo was obviously much calmer. He put his sleeves down again to cover the mark, raised his eyebrows and said calmly, "Compared to this, I want to know more. Who did the princess think I was when she woke up just now?" Chapter 22, Making Up Your Mind. Fingertips curled slightly. Chin Ruoruo felt a little embarrassed to have her thoughts seen through, and she didn't answer for a while. But Ashu didn't intend to let her go like this. It's not hard to guess, the princess's eyes just now were complicated and full of resentment, and she wanted to cut me into pieces. The only person on this grassland who is related to the princess and can easily influence her emotions is the third prince. Oh, I was wrong. Now I should call him the third prince. Am I right? Chin Ruoruo just wanted to end this ridiculous misunderstanding as soon as possible. She stared at the crackling wood in the fire and said faintly, "Of course I know you are not him." There was no way Yang Jinyuan would be so bored as to tattoo himself just to humiliate her. The laughter coming out of the mask was a little strange. He saw through her thoughts but didn't expose them. The princess's value to me is her relationship with Yang Jinyuan. In fact, it's not all for me, it's also for your sake. If you want to avenge the Qin state, for your father and mother, the third prince is your fastest shortcut. Otherwise, today's humiliation will happen again, and it will only get worse. The weather is getting warmer, and the princess doesn't want to watch the bodies of her family members rot in the wilderness and be eaten by wild beasts after the snow melts. Even burying them can only be a luxury. Stop talking. Chin Ruoruo couldn't help but clench her palms and covered her ears fiercely, but Archo didn't intend to let her go. He grabbed her shoulders and pressed on. The princess's concern is nothing more than not wanting to commit herself to her enemy, but being humiliated by one person and a group of people. How can you choose the princess is best for you? You should know. If you make the wrong choice, when you are no longer of any use, and even people like NU no longer help you, your fate will be 100 times more difficult than it is now. Is this the only way I can go? With sadness rising in her heart, Archo did not answer. But the moment she asked, Chin Ruoruo already had the answer in her heart. She had thought of other ways out these days. But trapped in this snowy grassland, all the connections she had with him now were related to Yang Jinyuan. Everything she has is based on Yang Jinyuan's mood. Her life became better after Yang Jinyuan came, but after Yang Jinyuan abandoned her she even had no food to eat. A woman who destroyed a country and had nothing left. The most effective thing you can rely on is your appearance. Archo sighed, of course there is. Now there is no one else. You can choose to commit suicide. Not only do you not have to do anything you don't want to do, but you can also reunite with your family immediately. It's just that I misjudged you. As soon as he finished speaking, a knife was thrown in front of him with a clang. Staring at the knife, Chin Ruoruo stretched out her hand and held it tightly in her palm. Seeing her pick up Archo, he turned his face away and put his hands behind his back. Chin Ruoruo's eyes changed from confusion to determination. She raised her hand suddenly but stopped instantly when it was still a finger's distance from her heart. The blade trembled constantly. After a while, he slowly closed his eyes and said in a deep voice, "I should die, but not now. If I die like this, everything that happened before will become a joke." The faint man breathed a sigh of relief. He took the knife from Chin Ruoruo's hand effortlessly. "In that case, use the old affection, guilt, your appearance, your body, everything you can to make him fall in love with you completely. Use him as a sword in your hand and finally smash his heart." Under the light, Ashu's mask shone with a different kind of brilliance. Chin Ruoruo slowly stood up and held onto the wall, remaining silent for a while. A vine grew out of the bottom of her heart, clinging to her heart and pulling her down little by little. There was a sudden heaviness on her shoulders, it was her dried clothes. Although he was wearing only coarse cloth, Archo bowed and his every move was like serving a noble in the palace. His expression was as cautious as if what he was holding in his hands was not linen but a golden dress. In a trance, she seemed to still be the most noble princess in the palace, with everything provided for her, and a life of luxury and carefreeness. What if you bet on the wrong horse? If she couldn't make Yang Jinyuan fall in love with her, even if it was just sexual desire. It's not like she had never done it before. On the first night, when she and Yang Jinyuan had sex, she had wanted to arouse a little bit of his sympathy, but the result was impossible. Hearing Archo's unhesitating denial, Chin Ruoruo couldn't help but laugh. "You are just a slave, how do you know what Yang Jinyuan is thinking? She has been with Yang Jinyuan for so many years, but she still can't guess or see through him." Her jaw tightened, and Wei Liang's fingers gently lifted her chin to save her lip that was pierced by her teeth. "I understand." The eyes under the mask were complex and deep, fixed on her face. Even though she couldn't see his expression clearly, Chin Ruoruo could feel that he was frowning. When she wanted to see more clearly, Ashu let go of her hand, turned his back, walked to the front of the cave, and stood still without looking back at her. "Princess, remember, if you want the third prince to take the bait, you must act like it's real. You must first deceive your own heart and your own body. But you must be careful to guard your heart in the process. Don't let it get lost." Before Chin Ruoruo wanted to say something, Ashu had already disappeared at the entrance of the cave. Looking at the empty cave, she sighed deeply and squatted down with her knees hugged helplessly. "Hey, at least tell me the way back." Ouch. The sound of a wolf howling made Chin Ruoruo nervous immediately, and she secretly cursed herself for being so unlucky. This place is close to a water source, so it is inevitable that wild animals will come here to drink water and find food, but if they discover her whereabouts, she will have no other belongings and it will be difficult for her to protect herself. Chin Ruoruo held her breath, but still heard the rustling footsteps approaching outside the cave. A shadow elongated by the firelight appeared outside, sniffed carefully, then jumped in and started biting her trouser leg. Snow Wolf. Chin Ruoruo was so happy that she wanted to cry as she watched the snow wolf spinning around happily after finding her. He bent down and held the snow wolf in his arms. "At least, you are still worried about me in this world. Since everything is fine, let's go back." Hearing their voices, Chin Ruoruo looked up and found Nanifang standing at the entrance of the cave with a sullen face. "Mami." Following her line of sight, Chin Ruoruo saw no one behind her. She couldn't believe it. "Only you. What else?" Nanifang's eyes moved from the fire to Chin Ruoruo, then she turned away coldly. "I was wondering why it kept asking me to come out, and it turned out to be to save you. If I hadn't thought of the noble snow wolf, do you think I would have run so far for you? You should be thankful that you are lucky enough to have fallen into a cold cave and been washed away by water and still survive. You are the only one in all these years who has survived. Be more careful, you won't be so lucky next time." Seeing Chin Ruoruo still standing there, Nanifang took 2 steps out impatiently, still not leaving. "Are you asking me, an old woman, to call for someone to catch the fugitive?" After calming herself down, Chin Ruoruo followed him out. The hand holding the snow wolf tightened. "Madam Fang, does Yang Jinyuan know that I am in danger?" Chapter 23. What is true and what is false? The figure who was leading the way in front suddenly trembled. He turned back and looked at her deeply before turning around as if nothing had happened without answering. Chin Ruoruo seemed to have her thoughts seen through. She bit her lower lip and said no more. "Although I came here to look for the snow wolf." But when Qin Ruoruo walked back, she found that the cave where she was rescued was much farther away than she had imagined. The road was slippery and difficult to walk on. By the time we got to a place where we could see the camp clearly, our shoes and socks had already been soaked by the wind and snow on the road. Qin Ruoruo was about to ask where Yang Jinyuan was, but she was afraid that if she tried too hard her intentions would be seen through. Suddenly I discovered that the camp was decorated with lights and was preparing for something. It was quite a lively scene. What are you celebrating? As far as she knew, there was no festival in Yang State today. Nanny Fang, who had been silent all the way, suddenly walked up to her side and said, "Since you are curious, go and take a look. The third prince should be here." Qin Ruoruo was shocked and turned around to see that Nanny Fang had already turned around and walked back to her residence. After hesitating for a moment, she hurried towards the busiest place. As soon as we reached the place where the crowd stopped, several carriages arrived one after another. The carriage in the middle is particularly eye-catching. A crisp tinkling sound was heard from far away. The lightweight frame looks like the legendary carriage of the Penglai fairies. The horses move steadily, making the carriage look even lighter. The gauze outside the carriage flutters in the wind, like a fairy's feather coat that will fly up at any time. Such a carriage must cost a lot of money, but I don't know who is in the carriage, so ostentatious and extravagant. Third prince. Third prince. The greetings brought Qin Ruoruo back to her senses. In order not to attract attention, she bent down and hid herself in the crowd, only looking up secretly out of the corner of her eyes. Yang Jinyuan came out from somewhere and slowly walked to the front of the carriage and stopped. "Third prince, I haven't seen you for a long time. I hope you are well." The voice was gentle and melodious. Even though Qin Ruoruo tried to suppress it, she could still hear the joy in the woman's words in the carriage and couldn't help but frown. I don't know if it's an illusion, but this voice always sounds familiar. Yang Jinyuan just chuckled, then suddenly turned around and glanced in the direction where Qin Ruoruo was standing. Qin Ruoruo quickly withdrew her gaze, bent her waist even lower, her heart beating like a drum. This girl from the Liu family came here at this time, not for the prince. I heard that they had already privately agreed to be together for 3 lifetimes, and in order to plan, they had suffered a lot for the prince. They were also the first family that His Majesty had ordered to continue living in the royal city. They came all the way here at this time. Is the order to grant the marriage coming down as well? The Liu family was a great contributor to the Qin conquest. If she could marry the third prince, she would definitely advance in the court. The Liu family was a family of meritorious service during the Qin dynasty. I heard that Our Majesty is also preparing to appoint her as the left prime minister. It seems that Miss Liu is the most respected woman in our Yangwang city besides the princess. The people watching in front of her were already whispering about something. Qin Ruoruo frowned and raised her head abruptly to look again, but the pair of eyes that had been fixed on her had already moved away at some point. A woman got out of the car, her waist as smooth as a willow and her steps as graceful as flowers, and she stood next to Yang Jinyuan. The sharpness of Yang Jinyuan's profile faded in the sunlight, and he actually looked gentle. The two of them smiled at each other, and there was an indescribable harmony between them. Qin Ruoruo's eyes trembled, and she couldn't help but take a step forward, staring at the woman's profile until she almost gritted her teeth. "You just said, what is the name of this woman in front of you? You are crazy." The person who was being pulled was startled and turned around to glance at Qin Ruoruo unhappily. He saw that her face was covered, leaving only a pair of eyes that were beautiful but full of hostility. He was startled and rolled his eyes, not bothering to pay attention. She didn't know many people with the surname Liu, and there was only one important official in the court. It's impossible. They must have the same name or they were forced into it. Qin Ruoruo ignored the other party's contempt and held her arm tightly, as if she would not let go until she opened her mouth. "Oh, you are so unreasonable. If you don't let go, I will call for help. Who knows what you do with your face covered?" Qin Ruoruo suddenly let go, took a few deep breaths, forced a smile, and apologized carefully. "I'm sorry, I just got here and haven't seen much of the world. I heard your eloquent talk, and so that your temperament is obviously different from these people. I'm really curious. Please forgive me and say a few more words so that I can have fun. HMPH." After hearing the nice words, the palace maid's expression instantly became better. She touched her hair and shook off the non-existent dust on her body. She lowered her voice and said, "You are quite perceptive. Apart from me, not many people here know this news. This woman is Liu Rui from the Liu family of Qin. Her family contributed the most to the attack on Qin this time, thanks to the Liu family who contacted the 12 important officials of the Qin palace and worked together with the third prince to catch him off guard. Now their family is a new noble. I heard that she and the former Qin princess Madame Qianrui are close friends. In fact, it was she who really fell in love with the third prince for life. Now they are finally married. The princess of Qin has become a slave who is worse than a prostitute. It's really. Hey, you don't want to listen. Qin Ruoruo's face almost lost all color. She took a deep look at the figure not far away that was disappearing in the tent. The girl in her memory who could confide her thoughts, the girl who encouraged her and Yang Jinyuan to express their feelings to each other, was actually pretending. She turned around and ran away, her stomach churning with a sour feeling. Fake. They are all fake. It was all a conspiracy. Everyone treated her like a fool and played with her for years. She ran very fast, and the whistling cold wind made her face feel numb. I don't know how far I ran before I slipped and fell heavily in the snow. I didn't even have the strength to stand up. I could only helplessly grab the snow in front of me and throw it into the foggy void where I couldn't see the road clearly. My eyes were filled with confusion and bewilderment. What is real and what is fake? What exactly went wrong? Since when did her father, the emperor, and her mother, the queen, know that those people who treated her with courtesy in the palace actually had evil wolves in their hearts? Tears fell from my eyes and disappeared silently in the snow. The numbness of the pain in my body could not overcome the burning hatred in my heart. The sky became completely dark. Nanny Fang, who was fiddling with the charcoal fire in the tent, heard the sound of the curtain rustling and her eyes moved. He began to mutter in dissatisfaction, "You still remember to come back. I was just saying that if you fall into the cold cave again, I will not look for you again." Hiss. He took a deep breath and looked at Qin Ruoruo, who was almost frozen. Just when I was about to ask something, Qin Ruoruo rushed into the room as if she had lost her soul, lay on the bed and stared at the top of the tent. Seeing Snow Wolf leaning against her and lying down too, Nanifang wanted to say something but closed her mouth again. It just made the charcoal fire in the room burn a little more vigorously. On the second day, when the prostitutes in the military camp had just gotten up, they saw the shadow of an unknown person standing outside. When he opened it, the surprise in his eyes stopped the exclamation that was about to come out of his mouth. "You, why is it you?" Chapter 24, Accepting Fate. "I'm here to look for Miss Hongzhu. Is she up yet?" Qin Ruoruo pursed her lips. The gauze-like clothes of the person in front of her couldn't cover the red marks on her body. She couldn't help but blush and forced herself to look away. However, she didn't want the person in front of her to misunderstand that she looked down on others, so she immediately became annoyed. "Hey, last time you were so arrogant and looked down on us, why are you here again? Go away, we need to sleep here. If you want to make a noise, go away. You are a phoenix with feathers falling off, you are not as high-ranking as us, chickens, don't bring bad luck to our land." After being pushed a few steps, Qin Ruoruo was unwilling to be driven away like this, so she could only straighten her back, bite her lower lip and speak to the tent. "Miss Hongzhu, I didn't accept my fate last time. Now I really want to ask you for advice, please meet me." The noise at the door woke up the military prostitutes in each tent. They opened their curtains and looked at Qin Ruoruo, either out of curiosity or to watch the fun. Qin Ruoruo was pushed so hard that she almost fell down. Just as she was about to continue speaking, the tightly closed curtain suddenly opened a crack. "Wait." Still wearing the same green dress, Hongzhu came out and looked Qin Ruoruo up and down. "You didn't accept your fate before, how do I know that you have accepted your fate now?" After a pause, Qin Ruoruo slowly spoke, "Because I have nothing to lose. This is my only way to survive." Hongzhu's eyes trembled slightly, and she walked around her. "Last time, the prince asked us to train you, but you didn't want to. We have completed our mission and received the punishment. Now you want me to teach you, there must be some reason. I want you to offer me tea in public and acknowledge me as your master, and I will teach you everything I know." As soon as these words were spoken, before Qin Ruoruo could express her opinion, everyone around her burst into laughter. They expected that the former princess before them would never accept a prostitute as her teacher, and they knew that the words were deliberately mocking her, so they expected that she would not be able to withstand the humiliation and flee. But then the laughter stopped abruptly. He stared at the woman who was bending down to greet him as if he had seen a ghost. Chin Ruoruo performed a standard etiquette, neither humble nor arrogant, and said in a resounding voice, "Master." A complex expression flashed across Hongju's face, and he turned and went back into the tent. His voice came out, "Just call me Hongju. I will only teach you for 1 hour at noon every day, and the rest depends on your luck." Chin Ruoruo was stunned, then followed him into the tent. Every day after coming back from Hongju, she would lock herself in the tent. No matter what people outside said about her being crazy or stupid, she would never be seen again. This went on for more than half a month. January is coming soon. Someone came outside the tent early in the morning to ask for a meeting. "Madam Fang, the prince asked me to come and diagnose Madam Chin Rui's pulse. Is it convenient now?" As soon as the person outside the house finished speaking, Chin Ruoruo's voice came out. "Mammy, please ask him to come in." Nanny Fang led the person in. When she lifted the curtain, she saw a figure sitting in front of the dressing mirror with her face covered by a gauze net. She was slightly stunned. This is the first time since the wound no longer needs to be treated with medicine that the wound has to be untied to expose its entire appearance. The medical officer carefully removed all the gauze wrapped around her wrists and couldn't help but sigh. The wound had almost healed, but the scar left by the wolf's fang stood there glaringly. The originally fair and delicate skin was completely destroyed like the best rice paper in the world, which made him feel terrified. Sure enough, the injury is no longer serious, but the muscles and bones still need to recover for a few days. Chin Ruoruo reached out and touched the scar, her expression somewhat indifferent. "Is there any way to remove this scar?" The medical officer hesitated for a moment and shook his head seriously. "No, the wound is too deep. I used the best wound medicine and scar removal and muscle growth medicine from the beginning. This is already the best recovery." Seeing that Chin Ruoruo didn't say anything, the medical officer packed up his medicine box and was about to leave. "Your Majesty, are you going to reply to the letter now?" "Yes, I wonder if Madam has anything to say." Chin Ruoruo shook her head, lowered her eyes and covered the scar with her sleeve, unwilling to look at it any more. "Please just report the truth. If possible, tell the third prince not to worry about tonight." As soon as she finished speaking, a tear quickly slid down her veil like a pearl rolling out of a clamshell, which made the medical officer feel uneasy. He responded hurriedly and turned to go to Yang Jinyuan's tent, explaining the scar in detail. Then the room fell into silence for a long time. The medical officer raised his eyes and carefully looked at the figure of the man writing something with a pen in front of the table. Thinking of that teardrop and Chin Ruoruo's lonely look, he felt a little reluctant. He hesitated for a moment before slowly speaking. "Your Majesty, do you need me to continue to treat Madame Chin Rue? Although she told me not to worry about tonight, I think it would be a good idea to try to lighten the scar a little more, so that she can recuperate more." Yang Jinyuan's men paused, looked up and glanced at him before speaking in a slightly cold tone with no emotion in his voice. "You said that Madame Chin Rue would be able to officially appear in the auction for Chengyan in a month, and now the soldiers outside are waiting for this day. You changed your tone again. Are you trying to embarrass me?" "No, that's not it. Madame Chin Rue's injury has indeed healed and will not affect Chengyan." "That's good. Your mission has been completed. It's enough that she can accept the favor. The rest depends on your luck. She is just a princess of a fallen country. It would not be a waste if you use more of such good medicinal materials on the people of Yang. Although you are a medical officer and a parent, your kindness should be shown to the right people." Yang Jinyuan spoke quietly without changing his expression, but his voice was like a knife flashing with cold light, which made people's hearts shudder. "Yes." When he came out of the tent, the medical officer couldn't help but shudder. He had just flattered the wrong person. This person had never been to Chin Ruoruo's tent in these days. He had thought that day. The figure holding the pen in the tent stopped what he was doing. Yang Jinyuan stared at the paper that was already mostly written, which was suddenly smudged by a drop of ink. He then crumpled the paper and threw it into the charcoal basin. After the medical officer left, Chin Ruoruo stared at the steaming kettle on the stove in a daze. Suddenly, the door curtain was opened by someone from outside and a gust of cold wind came in. She turned around quickly. Seeing that it was a red candle, although it was hidden well, I still felt a little disappointed. "Don't wait any longer. He hasn't come for so long. There won't be any will." Chin Ruoruo's eyes flickered when her thoughts were seen through. I didn't. But when she lowered her head, she couldn't help feeling panic in her heart. She had never thought that a miracle would suddenly happen to cancel everything she was about to face. Yang Jinyuan had someone heal her just for today. What she was afraid of was Yang Jinyuan's silence for such a long time. The news of her going to Hongzhou had already been ridiculed for several rounds. It was impossible for Yang Jinyuan not to know about it, but he had not reacted at all for such a long time. Even if it was hatred and ridicule, at least she was sure to stir up his emotions. But if Yang Jinyuan no longer even had the thought of humiliating her, how could she use him to make him fall in love with her, and how could she seek justice for her country and her family? Hongzhou poured the boiling water in the kettle into the bathtub, stirred the water with her hands, and soon mist filled the room. Qin Ruoruo calmed herself down, looked back at Hongzhou, and her heart sank slightly. Did you bring what I want? Chapter 25, The Auction Begins. Tonight. Qin Ruoruo's appearance was a lively event in the territory of Yang State. The country of Yang was bitterly cold, and the people's comfortable life depended entirely on the garrison led by Yang Jinyuan, who left their homes to guard and train at the border day and night, so their needs and preferences came first. They have been unable to go home and marry for many years, and military prostitutes are an important part of their daily life to relieve their worries. The prostitutes who appear on stage can choose their own clothing style and stage type, just to show their best side in front of everyone. If they can catch the general's attention on the first night, their status and treatment in the future will also rise accordingly. Qin Ruoruo's identity was particularly special. Compared to the beast fight, the people who had arrived at the stage early and were waiting for her performance had already sat around in layers, and could only wait until night fell. Third Prince. Inside the tent, Yang Jinyuan held a book in his hand and listened to the sound of the orchestra that was gradually rising outside, without turning the page for a long time. She came to her senses when she heard the servants calling out to her. Her eyes fell on the people holding various dancing costumes in their hands, and she frowned. We delivered these to Madame Qianrui as you instructed, but she was asked to leave before we even saw her. I heard from Madame Fang that she hasn't seen Madame Qianrui since this morning. I wonder what she is doing locking herself in the tent. Got it. Let's go down. Yang Jinyuan's face was gloomy. He thought of something, stood up and walked to the corner of the room, preparing to take something out of a small box. Suddenly, a clear female voice came from far away, and their voice came in directly, opening the curtain. Jinyuan, come with me to watch the stars later. As he said that, he walked up to Yang Jinyuan, pulled his sleeve and started shaking him. His eyes paused for a moment, and Yang Jinyuan brushed his sleeves as if nothing had happened. The box closed silently and remained locked in the corner. He turned his head and looked at the woman's bright smile, and the corner of his mouth twitched for a long time. Next time you come in, it's better to let me know, just in case, it's not good for your reputation. Liu Rui was slightly stunned, then she didn't know what she thought of. Her cheeks flushed, she quickly turned around and twirled fusu on her sleeve with her fingers, but she didn't care. What's the big deal? His Majesty the Crown Prince and my father promised that His Majesty would grant us marriage soon, let's talk about it later. Turning around, Liu Rui stared at Yang Jinyuan's profile with obsession, her eyes full of expectation. I hope that people outside will spread the news, so that everyone in the world will know that I like you, and it will be a done deal as soon as possible. For the sake of your Yang family's great cause, my family doesn't even care about the name of treason, so what do rumors matter to us? Yang Jinyuan's eyes flashed with sarcasm, and his voice was neither cold nor hot. He just pulled out the sleeve that Liu Rui was holding, and stood at the window, staring at the stage not far away that was covered with gauze and couldn't see the inside. His tone was a little more anxious. You don't care about rumors, but I do. Your Liu family has made great contributions. Even my position as a prince was obtained by you asking your father. You can also easily ask His Majesty to allow me to accompany you to travel. I will naturally do whatever you want, but not tonight. Are you angry? Jinyuan, I just want you to accompany me. I didn't expect the prince to threaten you with your mother's medicine. Seeing Yang Jinyuan staring outside the house, Liu Rui's eyes flashed with hatred. It would be fine at other times, but tonight it was that bitch who flirted in public. I don't want you to see it. Brother Jinyuan, please accompany me. Liu Rui was eager to act coquettishly, wishing to attract all of Yang Jinyuan's attention to herself. Suddenly the light outside disappeared, making the entire camp dark and quiet. Liu Rui screamed and wanted to hide in Yang Jinyuan's arms, but he pressed her down on the stool and said, "Sit still." When he reached out to catch him, Yang Jinyuan had already rushed out of the tent. The thing covering the platform did not disappear. Instead, countless candles suddenly lit up from behind. Yang Jinyuan then realized that the thing blocking his view was actually a round ball made of white cloth, which looked like a bright moon against the backdrop of the candlelight. A very small and fine bell sound was heard, and a woman's figure appeared from the middle of the bright moon, holding a peeper in her backhand, as if she was running towards the moon. The delicate sound of the peeper became more and more intense along with the drum beats. The person in the center of the moon danced faster and faster. Suddenly, flames rose from all around and the whole stage was ablaze. Yang Jinyuan's pupils trembled, and he moved his toes and quickly stood still again. The next moment he stared at the center of the stage in shock. A white horse rushed out from the fire, and the woman on the horse was dressed in red. She looked like a phoenix reborn from the fire, or a fairy descending from the moon. People couldn't help but hold their breath for fear of disrespecting her. The evening breeze after the spring came, mixed with the fragrance of unknown flowers, and Qin Ruoruo's long black hair danced behind her like a waterfall. Wherever the horse went, candles lit up silently, casting a circle of light around her, like a banished immortal with lotus flowers blooming at every step. As her flaming red sleeves waved, countless transparent butterflies flew out from around her and quickly disappeared into the night. Everyone stared at the woman on horseback stupidly. Some of them had seen her appearance before, and had also seen her dancing last time, but today, she was even more different. If we say that her beauty before was stunning, today, it is like an immortal, like a miracle. While I was still marveling at the spectacle, a half-grown snow wolf appeared from nowhere, walked out slowly, raised its head and howled, then lowered its head and prostrated itself under their horse. "Goddess, even the snow wolf surrenders to you. This is a miracle." Someone screamed and fell to the ground with a thud. Immediately afterwards, countless people knelt on the ground one after another, putting their hands on their foreheads in a gesture of praying, and lowered their eyes, not daring to look directly at the viewer. Soon, everyone in the camp knelt on the ground. Only Yang Jinyuan was left standing there, staring into the eyes of Qin Ruoruo on their horse. Qin Ruoruo looked at Yang Jinyuan and saw surprise, understanding, a chuckle, and calmness in his eyes, but he was not as shocked as the others. The sweat on my body suddenly turned cold. Wonderful. It really is wonderful. Yang Jinyuan's words woke the man kneeling on the ground as if from a dream, and he stood up in a trance. Qin Ruoruo sat on the horse, looking at Yang Jinyuan, who walked to her side and looked up at her, but did not move. "Ruoruo, you have never known how to ride a horse, but you have performed so well today. I believe that you will be able to get a high price." One sentence brought everyone back to reality. Just now, it was all praise for the performance on stage. It was really wonderful. It looks like we'll definitely get the highest price tonight. The people below were talking about it, but Qin Ruoruo's expression became more and more ugly. He quickly adjusted himself and smiled. She raised her legs and turned from sitting astride the horses back to sitting sideways, revealing a large area of smooth, white skin. Her long, white legs were exposed, swaying slightly with the movement. With this movement, everyone discovered what she was thinking about her dress. Qin Ruoruo supported her chin with her hand, and her smile was as charming as a fairy in the dark night, which made the men present excited. Chapter 26, Unstoppable. There was even a soldier who was close enough to boldly reach out and touch Qin Ruoruo's ankle. The jade-like, small and lovely jade feet made him reluctant to let go once he touched them. His eyes were filled with excitement and lust, and he wished he could pick her up from their horse immediately and ravage her in his arms. "General, this is very rude. It's not fair to other bidders." Qin Ruoruo suppressed her nausea and withdrew her legs from the other person's arms. Her eyes were as charming as autumn water silhouettes, making it impossible to look away. Staring at Qin Ruoruo, who remained calm and smiling like a flower, Yang Jinyuan's expression changed in the flickering candlelight. Although the general was unwilling, the people around him either pushed or complained, so he did not dare to take any more action. He could only stare at Qin Ruoruo. Qin Ruoruo lightly touched her cheek with her fingers and raised her voice. "Are there any warriors who want to take a picture of me tonight?" "Have. Wait until I take a picture of you, I'll make sure you know how awesome I am." The man was so excited that he was almost knocked over by the sound of the wolf and tiger, and the sound almost knocked over the beautiful woman. As her sleeves fluttered, the intoxicating sweetness spread, making the man who was waiting eagerly below unable to stop. Her red lips trembled slightly and her fingers lightly touched her lips, as if with endless charm. Chin Ruoruo's eyes flickered with distress. But there are so many of you, who should I be with? I? Go to hell, I have plenty of silver, stay with me. I'm willing to pay 2 taels. Don't embarrass yourself. She was a princess in the past. What can you do with 2 taels of silver? This general will give you 5 taels. Listening to the fluctuating quotations below, Chin Ruoruo was stiff from her tailbone to her scalp as she forced a smile on her face. She met Yang Jinyuan's indifferent expression from afar. She didn't say anything, but her heart was full of sarcasm. Look. This is her current wealth. Less than 10 taels of silver can buy her to do whatever she wants. Yang Jinyuan really did make her fall into the mud. She was clearly prepared mentally, but she still couldn't help but feel ridiculous. The perfect little face that was so perfect that it was suffocating showed a brilliant smile between breaths, and the smile on the corners of her mouth extended to her eyes, which were indeed cold. The money of all generals is earned by working hard on the battlefield, how can you waste it on me? After a pause, Chin Ruoruo straightened her back and smiled provocatively at Yang Jinyuan. Tonight, I will only follow the strong. You guys fight, and whoever wins can take me away without spending a penny, and will always be my guest of honor. Regardless of status, regardless of noble or humble, only strength counts. As soon as their words fell, the lively scene suddenly became immersed. Everyone's eyes were intertwined and there was hesitation among them, but more of them were excited and ready to move. Chin Ruoruo was half lying on the horse's back, like a seductive fairy. Her eyes narrowed slightly as she looked at the man who had been standing there. My lord, what do you think? My idea should be more interesting. Yang Jinyuan turned around expressionlessly and sat on the high seat. He followed the crowd and looked at her deeply. After a long time, he uttered a word. Allow. Almost instantly everyone made way for an empty space and formed a circle. 2 people squeezed out from the crowd and couldn't wait to confront each other. The bearded man wielding a broadsword was full of vigor. He raised his head and drank a pot of wine, then threw the porcelain bottle heavily on the ground and teased Chin Ruoruo. Madam Qianrui, my name is Wang Wu. Remember, this is the name of your husband tonight. The fight broke out in an instant, with swords clashing and blades dancing. Wang Wu beat down more than a dozen provocateurs in a row, and soon the ground was full of people lying in all directions. The cheers and fighting sounds almost made a hole in the sky of Yangcheng grassland. Chin Ruoruo stood straight on horseback, the smile in her eyes had long faded, her face illuminated by the bonfire was so beautiful that she looked like a banished immortal, yet it was like ice that could not be melted, staring coldly at the fight. When Wang Wu was flattering her, she frowned in disappointment. Her fingers unconsciously rolled up the falling hair, and murmured, this is too slow, why don't you all come together? The last one standing, I will be his tonight. The tulle of the shawl was blown by the wind and fell into the arena. The skin from the collarbone to the fingertips blossomed with mandragora flowers. The ugly scars left in the Colosseum turned into delicate and tempting flowers piercing the skin, making Chin Ruoruo's already beautiful face even more crazy and charming. Just by watching, these people felt hot all over. Their bodies, which were originally still hesitant, could not even wait for their brains to react and they had already uncontrollably rushed into the field and started fighting. In an instant, everyone was fighting in a ball. Chin Ruoruo watched coldly. The scene before her was almost identical to the chaos of war when she got married. Suddenly, she felt warm, and someone forcibly covered her with a shawl, blocking the infinite spring scenery. Her chin was pinched as she turned her head to meet Yang Jinyuan's dark eyes, which were like a deep pool that could swallow her up at any time. Ruoruo, you are so brave. Chin Ruoruo raised her chin slightly without dodging or avoiding, and said with the corners of her lips pointing upwards, Brother Jinyuan, look at how good my idea is, how much fun they are having, these men all want to make love with me. Do you know that after tonight, I will no longer belong to you, Yang Jinyuan, but to thousands of men? Yang Jinyuan tightened his fingers slightly, looking at Chin Ruoruo's red skin at his fingertips, and asked in a deep voice, aren't you afraid? Afraid? Chin Ruoruo held back the bitterness on her tongue and smiled, completely ignoring the suffocating feeling on her neck. Her eyes flashed with fierce hatred, because even if I become the most despicable existence, it is worse than being by your side every moment. Except you, anyone else can do it. Let them fight to snatch you, Ruoruo, you are still so smart. Seeing Yang Jinyuan's gloomy face, Qin Ruoruo laughed foolishly, her voice like a leaf swaying in the air. Yes, you found it. Unfortunately, according to the rules of your Yang country, the auction cannot be stopped on the night, and everything must be done according to the requirements of the prostitute. Even you can't stop it. Third prince, if you call a halt now, I'm afraid these people won't understand your efforts and will only blame you for ruining their good deeds. If you don't call a halt and let them continue fighting, more people will get hurt and maybe even die. I'm afraid that the news will get to the palace and they will blame you and strip you of your newly appointed prince. His eyes swept from Qin Ruoruo's eyebrows to the tears condensed in the corners of her eyes, and Yang Jinyuan's throat rolled. It's good that you hate me, but I'm afraid I can't let you have your wish. As the air was snatched away inch by inch and the feeling of suffocation gradually intensified, the knuckles that were clamping her trembled and then suddenly loosened, causing Qin Ruoruo to almost fall to the ground. She raised her head and saw Yang Jinyuan's eyes were dark when he turned around. Covering her neck, Qin Ruoruo looked at Yang Jinyuan's back and bit her lower lip. Yang Jinyuan turned his back completely, looking at the soldiers who had already fallen to the ground and cried out in pain, and said faintly, "You just said that I can't stop it." Chapter 27, Sent to the Bridal Chamber. As soon as he finished speaking, Yang Jinyuan floated out and captured the two leading generals who were fighting in full swing with one move. He kicked the fruit plate on the table next to him, and the dried fruits in the plate splashed and hit the soldiers around him. He was so exhausted that he could no longer stand up. One after another, the crowd was pulled and fell to the ground like a plague. In the blink of an eye, only Yang Jinyuan was left standing in the center. All this happened in a flash. The bustling scene just now became almost earth-shatteringly quiet in an instant. Qin Ruoruo stretched out her hand and patted him gently, smiling faintly. "It seems that my benefactor tonight is the prince." Jinyuan. Liu Rui, who had been waiting for Yang Jinyuan to return to the tent for a long time and was attracted by the hustle and bustle outside, heard these words as soon as she came out of the tent and exclaimed in disbelief. Qin Ruoruo turned her face to the side. Her smile was like a red spider lily blooming in the dark night. Without caring about being in public, she jumped off the horse and fell into Yang Jinyuan's arms, who caught her subconsciously, and clung to his arms infatuatedly. "How dare you? How can a slave like you approach the prince? Get off now." Glancing at Liu Rui rushing over with her fingertips almost touching her nose, Qin Ruoruo tilted her head to make her body fit tighter in Yang Jinyuan's arms, and smiled fearlessly and mocked at the right time. "Okay, let them continue the competition and choose a winner. As long as there is a winner, whether it's a prince or a slave in the stable, they are all my benefactors tonight. There is no difference at all." As soon as she finished speaking, the arms that were holding her suddenly tightened, and she almost cried out in pain. Those who thought they had no chance to be together started to prepare for the fight again. Qin Ruoruo stroked her palms and met Yang Jinyuan's gaze. However, she pretended not to understand the fiery and deep feeling in his eyes and said provocatively, "In fact, the pleasure I had with the prince on the wedding night really disappointed me. The thought of having sex with the third prince again really makes me lose interest. It would be great to change people." Such a bold statement made the crowd quiet again. Liu Rui took a deep breath and grabbed Yang Jinyuan's sleeve. "Jinyuan, how dare she be so presumptuous? Why don't you smash her mouth quickly?" Yang Jinyuan withdrew his gaze for a while, and then his lips opened and closed. "Since the winner has been decided, there is no reason to change people to compete again. Unless someone is unwilling to accept and can defeat me at this time." Liu Rui was unwilling and glanced at Qin Ruoruo, who was caressing Yang Jinyuan's chest. "I continued to beg. Your Majesty." Yang Jinyuan turned a deaf ear. Holding Qin Ruoruo, he looked around at the soldiers with different expressions. Most of these people had been training under the prince, and some had been under the command of King Yang for many years. Even though Yang Jinyuan, who had been a hostage for many years, was the key factor in defeating Qin, they advocated the use of force. Few people truly believed in Yang Jinyuan's sinister schemes. Although those who met his gaze were unwilling, they still felt a palpitation when they touched the sore parts of their bodies. The martial power of their third prince was far more unfathomable than they had imagined. Seeing that the surroundings were quiet, no one objected. Yang Jinyuan carried Qin Ruoruo and walked into the tent step by step. The person on his body kept moving around dishonestly, and his fingers were like torches, lighting fire from the bottom up to the neck. Suddenly, his neck felt cold, and Yang Jinyuan tilted his head slightly, stretched out his hand and squeezed it hard. An object rolled down from Qin Ruoruo's palm. Yang Jinyuan kicked it with the tip of her shoe and recognized that it was the ornament that was hanging on her earlobe just now. It's just that it has obviously been modified, making it sharper and easier to pierce the skin. With a light sigh, Yang Jinyuan's eyes fell on the scar on her palm, and his tone was dim. Ruoruo, I told you, if you want to kill me, you have to be more careful. Even if you don't spit poison, you have to wait until I fall asleep before you do it. Otherwise, all the effort you put in tonight will be in vain, right? Qin Ruoruo smiled weakly. She looked like a charming and alluring fairy outside just now, but now it seemed as if she had instantly taken off her disguise and only bloody resentment and trembling remained. Her white teeth and red lips accidentally bitten and bled, which was then washed away by the tears flowing from her eyes. Yang Jinyuan's eyebrows jumped suddenly, and the broken ice in his eyes exploded. Before she could react, Qin Ruoruo suddenly felt dizzy and was pushed onto the couch, with her hands tied behind her back. Yang Jinyuan approached her and looked down at her. The fabric originally chosen was extremely light and transparent, and this posture made her clothes fit tightly to her body, outlining her seductive curves. Suddenly, she felt cold and the buttons on her chest came loose, and with the charming datura flower on her arm, she actually had a temptation that made her want to be picked. Yang Jinyuan's fingertips stroked the lifelike petals, and his voice became increasingly hoarse. For tonight, you even got a tattoo. Ruoruo, aren't you most afraid of pain? I've never seen you so charming, and yet, those people saw it. I'm very angry. The fierce grip of the hot hand made her whole body tremble. Seeing the slight anger on Yang Jinyuan's face, Qin Ruoruo suddenly stopped struggling and sneered, angry. Yang Jinyuan, don't forget that it was you who put me in this situation. What are you angry about? Could it be that you are jealous of me being seen by other men? That's right. After all, you and I have both worshipped the heaven and earth at the feet of the Qin palace, and you married us with a phoenix crown and 1,000 miles of red makeup. As long as we don't divorce, we are still husband and wife. Even if I am the wife Qinrui appointed by you, even if my status is like a prostitute, I am inseparable from you, the third prince, and we will never stop until one dies. Although she said so, Qin Ruoruo only regarded it as a joke to provoke Yang Jinyuan. As for the pain, how could it not hurt? Her scar was very deep, and it took 1,100 stabs to cover it up. But compared to the pain of humiliation, the pain of her family and people being killed, and the pain of everything she had experienced these days, what was this pain? The fight continues until death. Yang Jinyuan's body suddenly stiffened, and he muttered these four words. The gloomy and complicated eyes made Qin Ruoruo's heart tremble. The tears on her eyelashes trembled again, and then rolled down again. The resentment in her eyes struggled with just the right amount of affection, and the trembling in her voice revealed helplessness. After tonight, you'd better kill me, so that I won't have to let my heart struggle so painfully anymore. She practiced this look in front of the mirror for a month, and practiced it for the last time before leaving. Looking at herself in the mirror, even she was almost deceived and thought she was still in love with Yang Jinyuan. Ruoruo. With a sigh, the curtain swayed, and Qin Ruoruo's whimpers were all swallowed into her stomach. It lasted until dawn, until Yang Jinyuan left the tent. The person on the bed suddenly opened his eyes were clear and there was no trace of sleepiness in them. She raised her eyes and looked around. This was her first time entering Yang Jinyuan's tent. Unlike what she had imagined, this tent was bigger than where she lived, and even though there were some red silks hanging around it, it couldn't stop the desolation. Originally, on the wedding night, she was supposed to light the dragon and phoenix candles here with Yang Jinyuan, drink the wedding wine, and then go to the bridal chamber. Now it seems that these people in Yang State think that there is no need to go to such a length and are unwilling to even post a wedding sign. Qin Ruoruo was still looking around aimlessly when she heard the messy footsteps outside the house and her heart suddenly skipped a beat. She had put in so much work last night. Just wait for someone to read out the decree to see if she has won the bet.